The latest GB News travel.
Good morning, I'm Russell Holding. Train services are suspended between Carlisle and both Glasgow Central and Edinburgh Waverley after something got caught in the overhead wires. In County Down, the A48 is closed along Moat Street at Donegal because of a fallen tree. Now, train services are suspended southbound from Gloucester to Swindon after a freight train broke down. On the M4 in Cardiff, the inside lane's closed eastbound at junction 33 west of Cardiff after an accident. There are queues taking roughly half an hour beyond junction 34. The M25 in Essex is closed anti-clockwise from junction 28 for the A12 to 27 for the M11 after an accident with queues from the Dartford tunnels. Also, two lanes closed clockwise with queues on that side from junction 26 at Waltham Abbey. The M2 in Kent is closed westbound at junction 1 at Strood after an accident with queues from junction 3, and the A2 closed eastbound towards there from Gravesend. And train services are suspended eastbound from Reading to Gatwick Airport because of flooding. That's the latest.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website gbnews.com.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
The Sleep Report 2024 is based on a comprehensive survey conducted all across the country, and the report found that over half the population, get this, falls short of the recommended 7+ hours of required sleep each night. And shockingly, 1 in 4 of us is getting 5 hours or less, and that includes you, doesn't it?
Yes, I'm very bad at sleep. 4 or 5, I'd say.
That's
awful. A bit like Maggie Thatcher. What would you get on average?
I'd say at least 6. 7 probably average.
That's probably not good. I think you probably need 8. Well, almost half of Brits rate their sleep quality as 5 out of 10 or lower.
Dr Manesh Shah and Dr Sita Shah joins us now to tell us all about the sleep and how Brits are struggling. Good morning to you both.
Morning.
First question is to you both. How many hours do you both get?
God, I think it varies. I try and hit that 7 hours of sleep.
Why are Brits so bad at getting sleep, especially in terms of hours? 4 or 5 hours for me, 6 hours for you. It's the same for everybody out there in the UK. We're just not going to bed early enough. Is it as simple as that? Or is it slightly more complicated?
Yeah, so I think the key is to establish a good routine. So waking up at the same time every day, making sure that you're going to sleep at the same time every day, and being quite sort of rigid and strict with yourself when it comes to those timings.
And also, it's not just the length of, I get, say, 7 hours, it's the quality, isn't it? You've got different phases of sleep.
Yeah.
Just explain those. Is it, as far as I remember, REM, deep sleep? Just tell us about that.
Correct, yeah. So, essentially, there's 4 stages to sleep. So there's stage 1 and stage 2, which are your lighter stages of sleep. And then stage 3 is your deeper sleep. And then you've got the stage 4, which is your REM. Which is a rapid eye movement stage. And it's the stage 3 and the REM sleep which is really, really important for restorative and regenerative sleep.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Good morning, 9:30 on Thursday, the 26th of September. Live across the UK, this is Britain's Newsroom with Andrew Pearce and Bev Turner.
Good morning, thanks for joining us. So,
and working from home if we can really will help prevent infections.
COVID rule breaker, the Prime Minister's broadcast urging you to work from home during the pandemic was not at his house. It was shot in Labour donor Lord Ali's £18 million penthouse.
Curiouser and curiouser. Prisoners freed by mistake. The government is under fire again now as dozens of convicts were let out of jail early due to an administrative error.
Meanwhile, if you're a well-behaved prisoner, Justice Secretary Shabana Mahmood is considering letting you out early to tackle the overcrowding crisis in our prisons. Have they really got a grip on law and order?
And the Prime Minister is in New York for the United Nations General Assembly, where he's going to make a speech. They are focusing on the war in the Middle East.
In relation to Lebanon, I'm very worried about the escalation and calling for all parties to step back from the brink to de-escalate. We need a ceasefire so this can be sorted out diplomatically.
And we're in the grip of a retail theft chaos crisis. The Co-op has taken a £40 million hit in the first half of this year as their top boss warns of an epidemic of retail crime.
And the Hollywood icon, Dame Joan Collins, joins us on the show shortly, and as characteristically, she pulls no punches.
You're watching Britain's Newsroom. Here's your news headlines.
Thank you very much. The top stories this morning. Allies, including the UK, US and EU, have called for a temporary ceasefire in Lebanon following an escalation in fighting between Israel and the terror group Hezbollah. In a joint statement, the 12-strong bloc called for a 21-day ceasefire to provide space for diplomacy towards the conclusion of a diplomatic settlement, as well as a ceasefire in Gaza. They said the hostilities were intolerable and presented an unacceptable risk of a broader regional escalation that was neither in the interest of the people of Israel or Lebanon. It comes after Israel's military chief told troops yesterday that extensive airstrikes in Lebanon targeting Hezbollah could pave the way for them to enter enemy territory. Prime Minister Sir Keir Starmer will address world leaders at the UN General Assembly later. Two 12-year-old boys found guilty of murdering teenager Sean Sisahai in a random machete attack are set to be sentenced. The killers were convicted in June of murdering the 19-year-old who was stabbed in the heart and suffered a skull fracture in November last year. They're believed to be the youngest defendants convicted of murder in Britain since Robert Thompson and John Venables, both aged 11, were found guilty in 1993 of killing 2-year-old James Bulger. The two boys, both now 13, face a mandatory juvenile life sentence and are due to appear in custody at Nottingham Crown Court today for the start of a 2-day hearing. The sentence is due to be passed tomorrow. A family centre based in Southport building, where the 3 children died in a knife attack, will not return to the premises. Heartspace, which ran groups for new mothers and families, had been based at the Norwood Business Centre in the town's Hart Street. Founder Jenny Scholes said staff would never forget the events of July 29th and were heartbroken by what happened. Children had been taking part in a Taylor Swift-themed dance class at that venue when a knife attacker killed 6-year-old BB King, 7-year-old Elsie Stankham, 9-year-old Alice De Silva. The building is understood to have remained closed ever since. And flooding and travel disruptions set to continue across large parts of the UK, with more heavy rain predicted. Nearly 3 inches of rain could fall over several hours in the worst affected regions today. The Met Office has issued 3 separate yellow rain warnings, one in western parts of Northern Ireland, one in Northern England and another for a large area covering most of England and Wales. The Met Office says the highest rainfall totals are likely across the Pennines and North York Moors, where 80 to 100 millimetres could accumulate. There's also the chance of thunderstorms and strong winds in the southern half of the UK later in the day. And those are the latest GB News headlines for now. More in half an hour.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Very good morning. Welcome back to Britain's Newsroom. Welcome back to the studio. Andrew, having been away in Liverpool, you sound a bit croaky, you're a bit worn out.
You normally get conference throat at the end of the conference season, but I'm afraid I went down with it in Liverpool and I've got the joys of the Labour conference next week. Sorry, the Tory conference next week in Birmingham, but we'll get through it. It was an extraordinary conference because it should have been optimistic, triumphalist, because it's the first conference since with the Labour Prime Minister since 2009. But it wasn't. The mood was, they were just fed up with him. They're fed up with the Prime Minister. They're fed up over the winter fuel. And then it started off disastrously over all the rows over free clothes and free gifts. And then it ended disastrously when the Labour movement voted massively to reject the winter fuel being taken away.
From here, it looked like the speeches that were made went down very well in the auditoriums, though. People were on their feet and clapping, and then they were all doing karaoke at the end of the weekend, celebrating.
Which wasn't a great look either, I don't think. But then, of course, they vote yesterday. So all those people who'd given the Prime Minister a standing ovation the day before voted to say, we hate your policy on taking away the winter fuel allowance.
Nothing but consistent, though, are they?
No, exactly.
Well, we've got a lot to talk about because, of course, what's come to light now is a video of Sir Keir Starmer urging the public to work from home during the pandemic. But guess what? It was broadcast from Labour donor Lord Ali's £18 million penthouse. So this was 2021. Have a look.
The new variant Omicron is spreading fast, and the argument that we don't know enough about it doesn't stack up. We may not be certain how dangerous it is, but we do know that lives are at risk. At times like this, we must all put the national interest first and play by the rules. Getting jabbed, wearing masks, and working from home if we can really will help prevent infections.
So the Prime Minister's press secretary says no COVID rules had been broken by the use of the flap for the broadcast. But I'm just staggered by this because it now seems that he'd had his nose in Lord Ali's trough for far longer than we thought. We thought this was just about clothes and spectacles, posh designer glasses in the run-up to the general election. But now see, and he dressed the house up to look like he was at home. So there was Christmas cards. What's going on? Look, Matthew Talbot's here, former Labour advisor. Were you working for the Labour Party at that point?
During COVID, yeah.
You were. What is going on with the Prime Minister and Wahid Ali?
I think that's the question a lot of people are asking. I spoke to somebody last night that knows Lord Ali quite well, and they...
Very rich man, he's worth £200 million at least.
Done well, very well.
Period already.
Yeah, and you know, he's a man of great political experience as well. He's been there 25 years, obviously knows lots of people, moved in a lot of circles. They were under the impression he's never gained to influence within government. He's wanted to help a Labour government get in, and really it was more about access, that he could speak to Keir, that he could speak to other people. He seems to be someone that just wants to help people. Now, I think Joe Public aren't going to believe that sort of thing, obviously, and I think the bigger question out of all of this for me, where I found myself nearly pulling my hair out, is what were people around him doing and saying? I was always very worried when somebody I didn't know wanted to donate to an MP I worked for or to the office or for extra staff. You don't know what they've written about in the past, you don't know what their views are on certain things, particularly during that Brexit era, and you would always go, how will this look? And I think the house thing is very odd because in a way, he's not giving him £20,000. For me, I was a bit conflicted last night. It's the equivalent of, if you need an hand, stay at my place. And they've had to come up with some sort of rental price, and that's what they've had to declare.
But why didn't he stay in his own home?
Well,
he was lecturing everybody else to stay at home, work from home, and he was staying...
during the COVID, well...
And he's got his own family in a swish penthouse apartment in Covent Garden. What about the kids getting to school?
I think the concern for me more as a sort of layman member of the public is the deception of the pictures.
Quite.
I think, you know, I see Nigel, who's, you know, I get on well with, who he has his own office, which when he does videos from there quite clearly isn't a parliamentary office. It's far too nice for a start when I look at it. Well, that's fine. He can work from wherever, do whatever. I think if he was to work from Lord Ali's house or the office or whatever, that's one thing. But to sort of make it look to the public that, no, I'm at home and I must be at my desk and whatever else.
Christmas cards behind it.
Yeah, there's a level of...
dishonest.
It is dishonest. And Tony Blair got into a lot of flack, right in my view, Matthew, because he was obsessed almost by rich people. He would go on dodgy holidays with dodgy people. Remember he stayed with Berlusconi, of all people, the Italian Prime Minister, one of the wealthiest men in Italy. He's clearly been... Lord Ali has clearly been around him for years. And we now know that during the election, because he tells us because his son needed some peace and quiet to revise for his GCSEs, back at Lord Ali's place, because the press were outside his house. Press weren't outside Keir Starmer's house on a daily basis, and even if they were, they wouldn't be making a noise.
Yeah,
It's a bogus excuse.
I was conflicted again. I looked at it almost through a comms lens and thought, this is a much stronger line. I think this is a man who looks like he puts his family first and he wants to look after his children. Then the story began to unravel last night because you see the dates don't quite match up. Right. And obviously, I think it's cut through with a lot of people I know that aren't political because it's that thing of, well, we'd love to do that for our kids, but we can't. And it's almost a bit of one rule for one.
And also, Matthew, I know you won't agree with this, but this is from a Prime Minister who wants his child to have the best opportunity in his exams. This is from a Prime Minister who's sticking VAT on private schools. And this is a lot of parents who want to do the best by their kids, so they scrimp and scrape to get their kids in private school. What about them?
Well, yeah, no, I won't necessarily agree, but that goes to show he's peeving off both sides of the argument because you've got a lot of people, and, you know, you used to will know, certainly you, Bev, coming from up north, working class people have to get used to the idea that they have to live within their means. And I think that's why that's annoying lots of people on that side of the argument, because they go, well, you know, I'd love to be able to do that. And I think also the idea that he said, you know, this is my son's one chance at his GCSEs. He's a former DPP and will be a former Prime Minister. His son's going to be all right, I reckon. I think the contacts you make in those circles, he'd be fine. But on the other side, you've got people going, well, you know, you're punishing us for putting our kids first and through their private schooling, and in fact, you've got all these sort of opportunities for your kids.
Part of me, I mean, obviously, this won't come as a surprise to anybody that knows me well, and it certainly won't come as a surprise to Andrew. In some ways, I don't care where he was sat talking that nonsense. He was just talking nonsense during the pandemic, in a way. Now, in 2024, in retrospect, you can look back and realise that there are layers of hypocrisy and dishonesty which look bad now. But you were working for them at that time. Did he believe what he was saying then when he was... Because this is my disappointment with him. This is what I can never forgive him for, is during that period of time when he should have been in opposition to the Conservatives, when he should have been questioning what he was telling people to do there, stay at home, get your jabs, all that stuff that we now know is patently, demonstrably non-scientific and has resulted in the economic woe we're now feeling. Did nobody in his ear go, you might want to take a different position on this? Who's he talking to there? Who's he pandering to?
I think at the time there was a consensus of let's not rock the boat, because I think at the time people felt like they didn't know enough, and it was I think it was almost
viewed
as a...
This is 2021.
Yeah, I think they viewed it as a war footing, and it was we all must stick together, and it may look childish or juvenile to be slating the government at such a what seemed like a bit of a crisis.
He was more zealous about lockdown than the Conservative government, and yet he's not at home. He's telling people to work from home during the second lockdown, and he's not in his own home. What a staggering hypocrite.
Well, I can't argue with that, you know, and I'm not here to sort of stick up for Keir or the Labour Party, I'll tell you as I see it. And again, for me, again, a bit like you, Bev, it doesn't bother me where he was necessarily. Now, whether he's broke COVID rules because he wasn't at home and technically wasn't really at work, if he's working from somebody's home, somebody that isn't his own, again, it's the deception for me. If it was Lord Ali's ornaments and furniture behind him, what would it have mattered?
Yeah.
But you've dressed it up as if you're at home.
Because he knew. Because he knew. That's it, isn't it? If it looked like Lord Ali's at home, he'd have known he was...
sat down and thought about this. I put some Christmas cards so it makes it look like... I mean, it was a full-scale deception.
Well, he might not have done, and this is the thing where I'm concerned
somebody else
again.
put his Christmas cards there.
It concerns me that's the job I would sort of probably do. I'd go, you know, make sure this is out of sight if it was something a bit dodgy, or make sure this is in.
Yeah.
So why are they making that decision to sort of deceive people and go, let's make it look like that? But they are not spotting that these donors might look a bit dodgy at some point, or this is a few too many freebies. Can you get away with being at Taylor Swift? And I can only come back to the idea that it's because they are people that are totally out of touch. There is no diversity of class or class consciousness within that office.
They normally get out of touch, politicians, prime ministers, at the butt end of a long parliament, so the Tories were woefully out of touch. They've been in power 14 years. This bloke hasn't even done 100 days.
Well, I saw you at a Labour conference, and for me, Rachel Reeves totally on leadership manoeuvres, very slick videos telling us all about her life story during her speech when we didn't really need to know that. It was about what she was going to do economically.
Do you think she doesn't think he's going to last?
I think she'd be very savvy. You know, I've always thought he might last a couple of years and somebody's going to knife him. And for me, you know, you look at the more ambitious people around that table, Rachel Reeves is one of them, then you're... Well, I think you can get to a point where if confidence is low, and we have these briefings about Sue Gray, Morgan McSweeney, now it's about the donors, and if you can get to a point where you go, Keir, if you stay, we're not going to win. You've got to do the ultimate sacrifice, a bit like Joe Biden in America. And they're going to be Prime Minister, not leader of the opposition.
Staggering that these conversations are going on and they've not even been in 100 days. We've got to ask you very quickly. Prisoners have been let out by mistake, including wife-beaters. It's not a great look from a party that says it's going to be tough on law and order.
No, what I would say, though, is it's a failure of the privatisation of the prison system. I think we saw that with the probationary system as well. We've seen people that have let out that shouldn't be let out. We've seen people that were let out that were and haven't been tagged, so we don't know where they are. And I think a lot of that, as I spoke about at conference over the weekend, is a lot to do with the fact that private prisons haven't worked for a long time in this country, and neither has private probationary system.
All right, that's Matthew Talbot, former Labour advisor.
Thanks, Matthew.
Yeah, thanks very much for that. What's coming up? Yeah.
Shoplifters, are we too soft on them? Well, clearly, the crime has cost the Co-op £40 million so far this year. What would be a suitable deterrent? We've got to fix it. This is Britain's Newsroom on GB News.
It's Patrick Christie's Tonight, and here we do things differently.
It's explaining the absolute madness of this, doesn't it?
It's explosive. I mean, this is very good. It's lively.
850. Your government sat there, Sean, and it did nothing.
It's controversial.
And the Middle East has been in turmoil since before I was born.
It's everything you need to kickstart your evening.
Everyone's had their Weetabix tonight. I love to see it.
That's Patrick Christie's Tonight, weeknights from 9 p.m. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News Breakfast, every day from 6 a.m.
And feelings of stress and anxiety tend to be quite normal for a lot of kids. And if it's normal for the kids, then it affects the parents as well.
Well, it seemes that our canine friends could be the cure after new research by the University of Bristol found that dogs are incredibly sensitive to their owners' emotions.
OK, how do we cheat into this? How can your doggy help your family handle stress during this time of the year? Let's go to the Director of Canine Affairs at Guide Dogs UK, Tim Stafford. Tim, we're talking about this as if it's a big revelation, but obviously, you know, a man like yourself, you're well used to this, and you can see when a dog is reacting. What form would that reaction take, do you think?
Yeah, you know what? It's nice when the science kind of confirms what most of us have known for a very long time. Our dogs become members of our family, and they come very, very close to us. So it's no surprise that anything that goes on in the family is going to be detected and picked up by the dog. That can be changes in behaviours. It can certainly be the dogs watching our behaviours and starting to mirror those behaviours. But what this research says is that the dogs can actually smell our emotions. It's not just that they're responding to our behaviour changes, they're responding to our physiological changes as well, because we smell differently when we start to get anxious. So at this time, there's lots of changes in a lot of families' lives. Kids are going back to school, young people are going to university, parents are having to deal with all of the emotions attached to that. So it's no surprise that our dogs start to detect that too.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Mark Dolan tonight is your weekend dose of news, debate and entertainment.
This sounds like a wild conspiracy theory.
Don't miss my big opinion. Mark meets and my take at 10.
Democracy is a funny old thing.
And we don't do boring, not on my watch. I just won't have it.
Let's go and get another glass of that bubbly. You've earned it.
That's Mark Dolan tonight, Saturday and Sunday, 9 to 11, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to Britain's Newsroom on GB News with Bev and Andrew.
So the Co-op's taken a £40 million hit from shoplifting in just the first 6 months of this year. Their top boss says criminals are becoming more brazen. So what needs to change?
It's not surprising, though, is it? Because we were told you could nick 200 quid worth of stuff and you wouldn't get...
And the police wouldn't show any interest whatsoever.
Be charged for it. So anyway, former Detective Superintendent of the Met, Shabnam Chowdhury, joins us now. Shabnam, is that part of the problem? Is that this message came out, well, if it's anything less than £200 of shoplifting, we haven't got time to deal with it. That's a lot of money for a little store, particularly the independent corner shops. What do we do about this, Shabnam? It's out of control.
It is, and particularly those small businesses and places like the Co-op, who I'm really surprised, £40 million losses, and they're going to open another 120 stores so that we can have even more shoplifters go into those and help themselves to their goods. It is a huge problem, and the reason why it's a huge problem in these smaller businesses is because it is easy pickings. If you go to the bigger stores, it's much more difficult to get out of them, to wander around and to nick stuff. The Co-op, in particular, as you see, is the example. When you think about it, they put security staff just at the front, so no one's seeing what's actually going on. There are those at the self-service checkouts who are helping themselves to probably half of those goods and not paying for the other half. And then you've got those that just blatantly walk in, organised criminals that go in day after day. £200 worth of shopping is almost like an entire month's worth of food shop for many, many people. And these individuals aren't just stealing, you know, milk and eggs as what people want to think, but you're talking about alcohol, all the stuff that is expensive, meat, steak, large consignments of milk so that they can go and sell it to their mates as well. Organised in the sense that it's actually an organised crime now.
In one of the speeches at the party conference, Shabnam, that it was said that there's going to be a new law to make people in shops to protect them effectively. So if they're assaulted, it's amazing that the government thinks we need a new law. Shouldn't the laws already be in place to protect shop workers from assault?
There are plenty of powers that police have available in their toolkit in order to prevent shoplifting. They've got banning orders, they've got on-the-spot fines, they've got public order offences, they've got burglary if these individuals go backwards and forwards. And let's be very clear to, you know, this new legislation. You're going to get a 6-month summary offence of going to prison. Well, there is no room in the prison, so shoplifters are going to be the last on the list that are actually going to be sentenced because they don't have any rooms. They are looking at the more violent offenders, those that are involved in more serious offences. So this piece of legislation, yes, it does protect shop staff, but actually I don't think it's going to make any difference to the shoplifters.
I think part of the issue as well, as you say, is these self-service checkouts. That's where people are nicking. That's where this figure of 30 million, I think, has partly come from as well. We're all having our faces filmed, whether we like it or not, on these tills. So it's not working, all of that CCTV, all of this idea that we do the job of the shopkeeper, we do the job of the retailer. Well, can you imagine a time, Shabnam, where they have to just rip all those out again and go back to people on the tills? Because basically customers can't be trusted.
Well, they can't be trusted, and I think that when this co-op open their new 120 stores, they've got to seriously think about their security measures, and I think the self-service checkout has got to be one of them. I have been in 2 separate co-op shops in the last sort of 6-7 months, and I've seen blatantly shoplifters walking in and wheeling out with large consignments of goods. I've offered to help the staff, and their first response is, we're not allowed to touch them because otherwise we're going to be held to account ourselves.
Yeah.
And then you've got the security staff that can't put hands on, or they are restricted in what they can or can't do. And then the police can't turn up.
Thank you, Shabnam. I'm so sorry we've run out of time.
Dame Joan
So
Collins.
sorry.
Dame Joan Collins, what's coming up next on the show?
There's lots more still to come on Britain's Newsroom with Andrew Pearce. But first, let's see the weather forecast.
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Morning, welcome to your latest weather update from the Met Office here on GB News. We are expecting the rain to cause further issues over the next day and a half. Further heavy rain today, tonight and tomorrow morning is expected to cause further flooding. Met Office warnings are in place. Check the Met Office website or app for full details. Particularly wet today over North East England, parts of Northern Ireland, North Wales, also seeing some heavy downpours. And in the south, a bit more showery in nature. There'll be some brighter spells, but here too, some heavy downpours are likely. Much of Scotland looking dry, some sunny spells on the west coast. It is quite cool here. Temperatures elsewhere struggling in the mid-teens, feeling pretty chilly with that persistent rain and the winds coming in from the North Sea over North East England and the far southeast of Scotland. Further south, we will see some sunny spells through the day, but there'll still be some heavy downpours around as the rain builds up here, particularly tonight and tomorrow. The potential for further flooding, a wet zone over North Wales and northern England. As I said, looking a little drier across the southwest of Scotland. A scattering of showers in northern Scotland with that northerly wind bringing a chill. The wet weather this morning should clear away from Northern Ireland, but likely to linger in North Wales, northern England well into this evening, and then we're looking at some heavier bursts of rain developing over the Midlands and southern England and South Wales as we go through the night. Because it's been so wet this week, that is likely to cause some further flooding issues through the night and first thing in the morning. Temperatures just about holding up in double figures tonight, but further north it is turning colder. The northerly winds pushing the rain away, but also introducing a cooler feel. Some good spells of sunshine tomorrow over central and southern Scotland. A much brighter day over northeast England. The rain should also finally clear from southern parts after a wet start. So many areas becoming becoming dry and bright by the afternoon, but also noticeably fresher with the winds coming down from the north. A distinctly cooler feel with temperatures struggling to get into the mid-teens. Many places only 11 or 12 Celsius. Bye for now.
That warm feeling inside. From Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather.
The latest GB News travel.
Good morning, I'm Russell Holding. Train services are suspended between Carlisle and both Glasgow Central and Edinburgh Waverley after something got caught in the overhead wires. In County Down, the A48 is closed along Moat Street at Donegal because of a fallen tree. In Powys, the A483 is closed each way at Llanelwedd because of an accident. Train services are suspended southbound from Gloucester to Swindon after a freight train broke down. The M25 in Essex is closed anti-clockwise from junction 28 for the A12 to 27 for the M11 after an accident. 2 lanes closed clockwise there too, with long delays each way from the Dartford tunnels and from junction 26 at Waltham Abbey. The M2 in Kent is closed westbound at junction 1 at Strood after an accident, with the A2 closed eastbound towards there from Gravesend, with long delays in both directions. And in Somerset, the A39 is blocked by an accident between Bendip and Wells. That's the latest.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website, gbnews.com.
You could be the next Great British Giveaway winner with a whopping £36,000 in tax-free cash in your bank account. Imagine getting the winning phone call for that.
£30,000 cash? Oh my God, I'm going to cry.
Yes, you see, that is absolutely fantastic.
Look at the moon. Oh my God, this is amazing.
For another chance to win £36,000 in tax-free cash, text CASH to 63232. One entry costs £2 plus one standard network rate message. Or text BONUS to 63232. 5 entries cost £5 plus one standard network rate message. You can enter online at gbnews.com/win. Entries cost £2. Or post your name and number to GB08, PO Box 8690, Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 5 p.m. on the 25th of October. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
Welcome to State of the Nation, daily plunge into the stories shaping our country. I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, and Monday to Thursday we bring you the insights, the facts, the truth about how our country is being governed. Because what happens in Downing Street matters down your street. Tune in to State of the Nation every Monday to Thursday, 8 to 9 o'clock. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, for a frank and honest discussion with those in power that cuts through the spin and gets to the heart of the issues shaping our nation.
You haven't confirmed that you want to stand as leader, but you haven't ruled it out either.
This report basically says that he's not fit to stand trial. Is he indecisive? Incompetent?
I deliver the dose of reality Westminster needs. That's the Camilla Tominey Show at 9:30 every Sunday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
10 a.m. on Thursday, the 26th of September, live across the UK. This is Britain's Newsroom with Andrew Pearce and Bev Turner.
Wearing masks and working from home if we can really will help prevent infections.
The COVID rule breaker, the Prime Minister's broadcaster urging you to work from home during the pandemic, was actually shot in, guess where? Labour Lord Ali's £18 million penthouse. So was he breaking the rules? And apparently he also recorded his tribute to the Queen from the same place. What's wrong with his house?
And prisoners freed by mistake. The government is under fire this morning as dozens of convicts were let out of jail early due to an admin error.
Meanwhile, if you're a well-behaved prisoner, the Justice Secretary, Shabana Mahmood, is considering letting you out early to tackle the overcrowding crisis in our prisons. Have they got a grip of law and order?
And the Hollywood icon, Dame Joan Collins, is going to be joining us on the show shortly. She does not hold back. Andrew spoke to her in her own house. I have to say, the interior design looks amazing.
You're watching Britain's Newsroom. Here's your news headlines.
Good morning. The top stories. Allies, including the UK, US and EU, have called for a temporary ceasefire in Lebanon following an escalation in fighting between Israel and the terror group Hezbollah. Israel's Prime Minister has said in the last few minutes that he hasn't given a response to the call and that fighting will continue until what he says all war goals have been achieved. In a joint statement yesterday, the 12-strong blocs called for a 21-day ceasefire to provide space for diplomacy towards the conclusion of a diplomatic settlement, as well as a ceasefire in Gaza. In a joint statement, they said the hostilities were intolerable and presented an unacceptable risk of a broader regional escalation that was neither in the interests of the people of Israel or Lebanon. It comes after Israel's military chief told troops yesterday that extensive airstrikes in Lebanon targeting Hezbollah could pave the way for them to enter enemy territory. Former chair of the Defence Select Committee, Tobias Elwood, believes a ceasefire is imminent, though.
I think it will happen in the next 72 hours. It takes some time. This is a very complex operation to get the scale of troop numbers that are required, although I'm sure the IDF, the Israeli Defense Forces, would have been preparing for this for some time.
Two 12-year-old boys found guilty of murdering teenager Sean Sahai in a random machete attack are set to be sentenced. The killers were convicted in June of murdering the 19-year-old, who was stabbed in the heart and suffered a skull fracture in November last year. They're believed to be the youngest defendants convicted of murder in Britain since Robert Thompson and John Venables, both aged 11, who were found guilty in 1993 of killing 2-year-old James Bulger. The boys, both now 13, face a mandatory juvenile life sentence and are due to appear in custody at Nottingham Crown Court today for the start of a 2-day hearing. The sentence is due to be passed tomorrow. Now, a family centre based in the Southport building where 3 little girls died in a knife attack will not return to the premises. Heartspace, which ran groups for new mothers and families, had been based at the Norwood Business Centre in the town's Hart Street. Founder Jenny Scholes said staff would never forget the events of July 29th and were heartbroken by what happened. Children had been taking part in a Taylor Swift-themed dance class at the venue when a knife attacker killed 6-year-old B.B. King, 7-year-old Elsie Stankham and 9-year-old Alice de Silva Aguirre. The building's understood to have remained closed ever since. Elsewhere, cyber attackers have caused disruption at 19 UK railway stations. Network Rail confirmed the Wi-Fi systems at stations including London Euston, Manchester Piccadilly and major stations across Liverpool, Birmingham and Edinburgh were all affected. People reported logging on to the Wi-Fi at the stations and being met with a screen about terror attacks in Europe. British Transport Police are investigating. The rail provider says it believes other organisations, not just rail stations, have also been impacted. A landmark AUKUS meeting's being held in the UK today as the Defence Secretary John Healey hosts counterparts from the US and Australia in London amid efforts to build a fleet of nuclear-powered submarines. Mr Healey will host Richard Marles, who's also Anthony Albanese's Deputy Prime Minister, and US Defence Secretary Lloyd James Austin III at the Security Partnership meeting. If Australia and the UK sign a treaty, the Westminster governments estimate the SSN AUKUS submarine build project would unlock UK exports into the billions of pounds. The Ministry of Defence says it'll support UK jobs for more than 21,000 people. The government also confirmed the new treaty will outline the UK's relationship with Australia on submarine cooperation. Farmers have written to the bosses of the UK's Big 6 supermarkets, calling on them to end farm washing and support local producers. The Farmers Against Farm Washing campaign claims major supermarkets are using fake farm brands and overuse of Union Jack branding to give shoppers the impression their products come from quaint British family farms. It claims that in reality, much of the food is increasingly sourced from industrial US-style mega farms or from overseas and masking the decline of Britain's family farms. And flooding and travel disruptions set to continue across large parts of the UK with more heavy rain predicted. Nearly 3 inches of rain could fall over several hours in the worst affected regions today. The Met Office has issued 3 separate yellow rain alerts, one in the western parts of Northern Ireland, one in Northern England and another for a large area covering most of England and Wales. The Met Office says the highest rainfall totals are likely across the Pennines and North York Moors, where 80 to 100 millimetres could accumulate. There's also the chance of thunderstorms and strong winds in the southern half of the UK later in the day. And those are the latest GB News headlines for now. I'm Tatiana Sanchez. More from me in half an hour.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Very good morning. Welcome back to Britain's Newsroom, live across the UK on GB News with me, Bev Turner, and Andrew Pearce.
As always, we want to know what you think, so do send your views, post your comments by visiting gbnews.com/you'll say, and let's see what you've been saying.
So Michael has said this morning, Michael, Starmer is making it too easy to make derogatory comments about him. It's like shooting... Now, you do say, Michael, it's like shooting ducks in a barrel. I think you mean shooting fish in a barrel. Isn't that the metaphor? It's shooting fish in a barrel. It is. Well, or ducks.
At the Labour conference, it was hard to find anybody who could understand the Prime Minister's preoccupation with Wahid Ali, Lord Ali, who's worth about 200 million, made a lot of money in the media. He gave us the big breakfast show back in the 90s with
People don't
Paulie
know
Yates.
that about him. He was head of Carlton Television,
He
and it
was.
was The Word. Do you remember The Word?
Yeah. And he's been incredibly successful. He owned the company Charayon, which has got something to do with the royalties at the Agatha Christie estate. He's got his fingers in so many pies. He was chairman of ASOS. He's worth around £200 million. But why does the Prime Minister, as he is now, why did he need to be in Lord Ali's apartment during COVID? Why is he lecturing the country, you've got to work from home, stay at home? He's not at home. And he's dressed the house up to look like he's at his home.
And it was
Deception.
Blair. It was Blair who was first seduced by Lord Ali. And Lord Ali was the youngest.
Blair made him a peer.
He was the first openly gay Muslim politician, effectively.
In the world.
In the world. I mean, you know, he wins the trophy for the Wokery Award, doesn't he, in terms of all these identity politics that he manages to fulfil. Now, I'm not saying that's why he necessarily got the job, but there's absolutely no doubt that Tony Blair would have been impressed by somebody that he saw representing the diverse, as he would say, you know, the melting pot, the cornucopia which was going to become politics. Not all bad. But we have to ask in 2024 why this man has exerted so much influence over the Labour Party.
And he's given the Labour Party more than £500,000. He gave the Prime Minister designer specs, designer suits. I saw him at Liverpool. I actually asked him about one of the shirts he was wearing. I said, is that one of Lord Ali's shirts? It was weird.
What did he say?
Well, he had a suit on, but with a really dark blue shirt on. And it was a terrible clash. Sartorial disaster, in my view.
To the fashion police.
Well, I'm not exactly a fashion, as you know, but... You're a man of a certain age, I'm afraid, and he often wears those shoes that look like trainers, which is weird.
I mean, see, I'm all right. I'm OK with him wearing his trainers. I mean, that doesn't bother me too much. But
why can't he buy his own clothes?
Well, quite.
And why does Lord Ali pay £5,000 for Lady Starmer's clothes? And you know her new nickname now, Lady Victoria Sponge.
Oh. The nicknames are coming thick and fast with these two, aren't they?
Victoria Sponger. because Wahid Ali paid £5,000 for her clothes. Did she look like she was wearing £5,000 of gear at the Labour conference? No, she was wearing another frock that was borrowed.
I just want to know why Wahid Ali wants access. And that's what, actually, Matthew said at the start of the show. A lot of love for Matthew in our inbox, actually. People saying how much they like him on the show. Matthew Talbot, thank you. New to GB News, but he's going to be a bit of a regular on here every week, Matthew Talbot, that's right. He's been on GB News before. I find him quite impressive, says Eileen. While he clearly supports Labour, he's not a Labour apologist and talks sensibly about his policies and the outcomes. Exactly. And we like all voices here.
And he was with Labour right up until the general election, so very close. So he knows Keir Starmer very well. And he is struggling, too, to understand this preoccupation with Wahid Ali.
And Brexit Crusaders read my mind for me. I love it when our viewers do this. The Word, which was the show that Wahid Ali was executive producing, was presented by Terry Christian, who, as you know, is a card-carrying socialist.
Certainly is.
And so, you know, nobody should be having that much influence on our democratic process, behind the scenes, keeping themselves completely silent without us knowing what they want for that access.
But it's the subterfuge the Prime Minister's deployed here, making that, where he was filming the video about COVID, making it look like it was his own home. That's subterfuge, that's deception.
We were on the telly, you're right, because we were on the telly during that time, on various sort of talking shows and stuff. If I had not been in my house when I was beaming into one of those programmes, I would have been absolutely vilified.
So would I.
Bev Turner should have been in her house, and that's not her house, because we've seen her broadcast from her house, that's not it, right? But even worse then, if I'd gone, OK, well, I'm going to go and stay at my mum's house, let's say, but I'm going to make it look like my house, I'm going to put pictures of my kids in the back, and I'm going to pretend it's my house, then that would have been worse, and that is effectively what he's done.
Yeah, absolutely. Right. Now, number 10's admitting to releasing 37 prisoners by mistake. Some of them domestic violence abusers, people who've beaten up women, and some of them have still not been returned to jail.
That's right. This error has been blamed on problems with the government's controversial, if you remember, and quite sudden early release scheme.
And now Labour are apparently considering plans to introduce a Texas-style prison system with a points-based approach. If you behave well in prison, you get out sooner.
Texas, it's a bit strange, isn't it? I didn't know.
She's going to go out there to have a look, the Justice Secretary.
Oh, nice excuse for a jolly. Can't you just ring them and ask them how it works?
Yeah.
Justice Secretary Shabana Mahmood will let prisoners out early if they behave well in order to tackle overcrowding.
So let's talk to Nick Hardwick, who is a former Chief Inspector of Prisons. Nick, morning to you. The prison population is much bigger now than when you were in charge of the prisons. Is the point system the right way? If they behave well, get out early? I thought they did that already.
No, well, they don't, actually. I think that would surprise most people. You don't get any reduction in your sentence just for good behaviour. And the Texas scheme is part of what they call the Republican right on crime scheme. So it's supported across a lot of Republican states. And the idea there is that if you're locking people up who don't need to be locked up, that's not a good use of taxpayers' dollars. And that as well as punishment, you need to try and have systems that reduce the risk that people will reoffend after they're released. So I think it is worth having a look. And there may be things that we can learn from the Republican approach that can be applied here.
What sort of things, Nick, do you think? Because I don't think anybody would agree that it's sensible to just keep people locked up if they're not a danger to the community, because A, they're wasting time, they're not making money, they're costing the state money, they're not forwarding themselves, they may have had to leave a family outside that could do with the support. What should we be doing with people in prison, educating them at the very least, surely?
I think, look, what a good reason for sending people to prison is because what they've done is so appalling they need to be punished. Doesn't do them any good, but actually it's important that society sees people being punished. But we also need to do things in prison that do reduce the risk they reoffend. They're very basics. Teach them to read. Make sure they're working regularly, so that not just that they learn a skill, but they gain habits of employment, getting up, going to work. Do something about their drug problems. And often I think people who's a really good public servants who get forgotten, prison officers, often a lot of these men, and it is mainly men, have never had a kind of decent male role model, a decent father figure. And sometimes good relationships between a prison officer and the prisoners can be the factor that changes someone's life. So punish by all means, but that's not enough.
How is it that they've made some of these mistakes as well, Nick, in releasing some prisoners who are domestic violence abusers? 37 have been released by mistake. How can they make a mistake as fundamental as that?
It looks to me, I mean, it's a bit unclear what happened, and I think this will be very frightening and distressing for the women concerned. So the first thing is to get these guys back into prison where they belong. What looks to have happened is that the men who were released early were sentenced under old legislation that's now been superseded by newer, tougher legislation, actually. And the rules that said that when people could be released early or not released early only referred to the new legislation. It didn't include the old legislation, and so it just got missed. It looks to me like a policy mistake rather than an operational error.
Nick, these changes in prisons that we're talking about in terms of making sure that prisoners learn English or know how to prepare for a job interview, etc., are they expensive systems to implement?
Not if what we can do is we can reduce the demand for prison places, they're cheaper. Right? The big thing about the Texas and the Republican plan was spending all this money on prisons without doing anything to change how people behave was just a bad use of taxpayers' dollars. That was their kind of mantra. And I think that's why it got support across the political spectrum.
Just finally, Nick, the Prime Minister in his speech talked about the fact people might not like it, but a prison could be coming near them because we need new prisons. How many new prisons do you think they need to build?
Well, it depends how successful the other things are. I mean, at the moment, they've got plans to build an extra 20,000 places, which will cost £4 billion. I mean, I think a lot of that is not money well spent. And I think if we put money into trying to, some people need to be to prison and they need to be in prison for very long times. But if we can get some of the others out successfully without reoffending, that would be a better use of the money, I think.
OK. Thank you, Nick. That was former Chief Inspector of Prisons, Nick Hardwick, there, talking a lot of sense.
Talking a lot of sense.
In my opinion.
Now, this is a statement from the Ministry of Justice who say...
Public safety is our first priority. We took decisive action to keep the most dangerous offenders locked up. This included blocking the early release of domestic abuse offences, such as stalking and controlling behaviour.
Except some got out.
Yeah.
Thanks for that statement, Minister of Justice, but you don't acknowledge some of them got out.
That's right.
Because they screwed up.
Yeah. Up next, you will not believe how much a couple were fined by the police for reporting a migrant who was hiding in their van on a French border. You don't want to miss this. Britain's Newsroom on GB News.
Martin Daubney, weekdays from 3 p.m.
Strictly starts tomorrow. There's been a bit of controversy around this year's show. What are your thoughts on that? You've been defending Giovanni. What's your thoughts on all of this year's show and the build-up to it?
Oh, I think it will be as wonderful as it's always been. You know, it's an uplifting show, isn't it? It's got the glamour, everything. There's nothing to make you sad in it. And, you know, I had the most amazing time. And Giovanni was my partner. And it's still, you know, a life-changing experience. And at that time in my life as well, it was a year after Paul, my late husband, had died. You know, it was a tough, tough time. And it just totally brought me out of all my grief. And everyone on the programme is just so lovely. It's like a big family. And my experience of Giovanni, I know other people have said they've had a different experience, but mine was he really looked after me in my grief.
I remember, Debbie, at the time you spoke so movingly about how dance was like therapy for you. It helped to bring your Shazam back. It got you back on track. But I got to ask you at all about the investigation that's being carried out in Giovanni. Do you think that can be properly conducted? And have you been approached to give any evidence in that?
I think it will. I'm sure that, you know, they will do it very thoroughly. And the fact that it's taken quite a long time, you know, is that they're really going into it to make sure they make the right decision at the end of it. And I think lots of people will be invited to give their experience of Strictly. So I just hope at the end of the day, you know, I don't want anyone to be bullied. You know, I'm really against all of that.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Hi there, I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm going to take a second to tell you all about my show, Dubes & Co. We start off with the issues of the day. We then bring in both sides of the argument. We get rid of the disrespect. And then you throw me into the mix. And trust me, I'll tell it exactly how it is. And then, of course, the magic ingredient, you at home. We mix it all together and what have we got, in my opinion, the best debate show in town. Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
The king of breakfast TV is back. That's right, Britain's favourite TV host, Eamon Holmes, returns to Britain's hottest breakfast programme. Breakfast every day from 6 a.m. only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm Isabel Webster. Thanks for joining us on GB News, Britain's news channel.
It is 10:20. This is Britain's Newsroom with Andrew Pearce and Bev Turner.
We are joined by the former Culture Secretary, Michelle Donnellan, and the journalist Jonathan Liss. Michelle, first time I've seen you since the general election. I was just saying off-air, your defeat in your Wiltshire constituency was one of the big shocks to me.
Hugely disappointing, but we are where we are. The British public send a very strong message, loud and clear, which impacted me as well as many of my former colleagues.
How furious are you that Rishi Sunak called such a stupid early election?
I don't think furious is the right word. I'm disappointed that it wasn't in November and we weren't given longer and the whole summer, etc., and time to turn things around and get those flights off to Rwanda. But we can't rewrite history. We've got to go forward now and really be a strong opposition to this government. That needs to be the priority, rather than navel-gazing and looking back.
Do you understand why he did pull the trigger on the election then?
I think you'd have to ask him, not me. I wasn't privy to any of those conversations. I found out about 2 seconds before the general public, because I was in South Korea at the time for the follow-up AI summit.
It was extraordinary. He told the Cabinet, and as some ministers started to say, I'm not sure that's a good idea, he then told the Cabinet, I've already been to see the King. It was done. The deal was done. With the Deputy Prime Minister, what was his name?
Oliver
Dowden was the key figure in all
But
that.
let's face it, the result wouldn't have changed if he'd waited longer, and it might have been worse.
I'm not sure about that. I think it wouldn't have been as bad, actually, because the Tories weren't prepared. They had no money either. And Nigel Farage would almost certainly have been in America with Donald Trump if the election had been in November, and reform cost you your seat.
Yeah, but we can spend a lot of time talking about that and looking backwards, but that's not going to help the country to face the challenges that are ahead. It's not going to make us an effective opposition. It will make us inward. And one of the key messages that people complained about the Conservative Party and the government was that too much infighting, too much navel-gazing, actually needed to look outward. So I think we really need to move forward now and not make that mistake again.
All right, well, let's talk about this extraordinary story about Keir Starmer and the penthouse with Lord Ali. So now we know not only when he was telling the country to work from home, he wasn't at home, he was in Lord Ali's apartment, didn't declare it, because that's a benefit in kind, Jonathan. He made it was made to look like it was his home with the position of the Christmas cards, and now we discover he also did the tribute to the late Queen when she died a year later in Lord Ali's apartment. What's going on?
I think that there are a lot of things that we can criticise Keir Starmer for, and I'm not saying that this whole story doesn't have some elements to it that require scrutiny or that are worthy of scrutiny, but I just don't think this is one of them. Even though Starmer was advising people to work from home, it's a television broadcast. Television broadcasts don't always happen from someone's living room. They happen in TV sets or studios like the one we're in right now. It wasn't during lockdown. It was during the Omicron variant.
I did lots of television during lockdown, and I did it all from my
OK, fine. So that's... Maybe you had a really, really nice studio space that you could broadcast from.
And of course he doesn't. He lives in a normal house.
Listen,
and also, just to quote what he actually says in that clip, he says, if you can work from home, you should. That literally comes out of his mouth in that statement.
Look, if I had a chance to, go into a TV studio for a few minutes to make a broadcast to the nation instead of my lounge, then I would do that, especially if I'm the leader of the opposition. It wasn't lockdown. There's no hint of law breaking here.
If you can work from home, you should, he says.
Yeah, and hang on a minute. He made it look like his house. Let's not forget, he was very disingenuous. He had pictures of his family up, Christmas cards. He gave the appearance that he was working from home, as he was telling people to do. Yeah. And he shouldn't be in a position where he's telling people to do something but not doing it himself. And the bigger point here about all of these stories mixed together is the hypocrisy. Yeah. This is an individual that went hard on the fact that he was Mr. Rules, he was straighter than straight, he would be a different type of politician, he would clean everything up. He comes in, we find out that he spent a lot of time at Taylor Swift concerts, at football, at all this, that, taking clothes, and a lot of politicians do that. My big question is how the hell he had the time to do that as leader of the opposition and looking after his constituency and a father, and why he felt it was justified to throw so many stones when he knew what he was personally doing.
I don't think that he was throwing stones. He was criticising people like Boris Johnson, who would claim
of cronyism.
But Boris Johnson, in the wallpaper scandal, sort of borrowed a fortune of money and tried to evade declaring it. That was a scandal, not the fact that the donations had been made.
No, it stays in the Downing Street.
Yeah.
It's his clothes he was wearing, which he still got.
Look, we can have a big conversation about, first of all, donations in politics, because we don't have a taxpayer or publicly funded model of politics, which means that politics will have to be funded by donations. Michelle, I saw in the register of your interest that you received sort of more than £10,000 in donations as well while you were an MP. And that's normal. That's how things work, provided it's openly declared and there's a transparency there. And then there's obviously a separate issue about gifts, and I think that there is a balance to be struck here. You can either have a completely extreme, absolute position that no one should ever receive any kind of gift as a politician or any kind of event, and there are always going to be occasions where a minister will have to go to something, or you can have something where it's a free-for-all.
But that's not the point, is it? The point is the hypocrisy here. The fact that he presented himself as somebody is totally different. To me, I'm not bothered about what he took or didn't take. It's the fact that he presented himself as somebody totally different and almost hoodwinked the electorate into voting for something that didn't really exist.
You're the best person here, Michelle, to say what Starmer may have thought when Ali gave him this stuff. When you were giving gifts...
I was never given any gifts. I was obviously doing something wrong.
So when you say about the members' interest, the £10,000 then that Michelle received...
I don't know what that was for.
They were for leaflets and things.
Well, no, there was one on the register. It says that there was one. I mean, I just looked briefly. It said I think £2,000 for leaflets, and then £10,000. It wasn't specified what it was for. So I don't know what that was for.
So you would have spent that on what? Kind of campaigning expenses?
Yeah.
I mean, on what?
Leaflets, but leaflets cost money, delivery charges, all of that. But I've got no problem with people taking gifts. Many political parties take gifts for different types of things.
But
I think the problem here is the hypocrisy.
Do you know when you get those gifts that donor is going to want something in return?
Well, you shouldn't expect that they would, no, because the type of...
Everybody knows that there's no such thing as a free lunch. So you might think, OK, they might give me £10,000. At some point, I'm going to have to do them a favour back.
No. So if you're taking... And you wouldn't just get normally 10,000 and 10,000, you'd get small increments that will add up. But if you are a disciplined politician that is of good moral statute, you would say to them that thank you very much, but of course it would keep the relationship very professional. What's happened here is quite different because this individual was actually given a position within Number 10 and unlimited access. Yeah, it's my understanding that one of his employees went on secondment to then try and fix up some of the Labour constituencies in terms of who was actually going to be the candidate there. So it's the untold access. Whereas the people that gave me donations, I just thank them and
well, Michelle, you did
receive
what? You did do something that Keir Starmer hasn't done. You did receive basically £34,000 to the taxpayer to pay off your libel bill. And the thing with Starmer is he hasn't received any public money for all these things. These are from private donations. So, there are a lot... This is the problem that we have in politics, is that if one side, starts pulling this thread, it's going to affect everybody.
They took £107,000 in gifts. The second highest after that was £40,000.
Look,
almost three times
the most money that was donated in the last year was to Conservative MPs, and more Conservative MPs...
No, the MP who had the biggest number of donations in the last 5 years was Sir Keir Starmer.
And let me just sort of come back to your direct point. So, as I've said throughout, I'm not opposed to MPs getting donations. That's how we can fund leaflets, etc. It would be impossible for democracy to function in this country if it didn't allow people giving donations. Nor am I opposed to people being transparent about the gifts. It's then up to them to justify that. The point is the hypocrisy here. And in regards to my individual specific case, what we're talking about is £15,000 plus some legal charges for a letter that was written on the advice of civil servants and approved by civil servant lawyers, also approved by the Permanent Secretary and approved by Number 10 at the time. Now, if you work in any commercial organisation and lawyers within that department or that business had said this is legally sound, you can send this out and no ramifications will happen, and you then go ahead and do that, you wouldn't expect to be personally paying the charge.
If I write a letter and I go through my lawyer before I say it, and they say, yeah, this is fine, and then I libel someone, I don't expect the lawyer to foot the bill.
No, but if you're working... So say you were working for a big company and it was is internal and that was happening, then yes, you would expect that to happen because it would be you'd have done it not in your personal capacity, you'd have done it in your role as whatever you were. So it's a very different kettle of fish. And I think this is trying to blur the story here because the story here is about hypocrisy. It's not about the fact that he took donations from any Tom, Dick and Harry.
But he never said that he wasn't going to accept any donations or any gifts, and that it's completely legitimate if his wife, who's doesn't want to be a public figure, takes some words, for example.
Why did he create the deliberate impression he was broadcasting to the nation about the importance of working from home from a rich
Andrew, this is not a story. People broadcast from TV sets all the time.
I guarantee, Jonathan, this is going to be a huge story and it's going to be a big problem for the Prime Minister because he's not levelling with the public.
I don't look. I think that when you have these...
You're a bit party-pre here,
I'm not... No, look,
I'm afraid you are.
When you have big stories like this that get legs, sometimes a story comes in from the left or from the right that's sort of just trying to sort of add to the melee but actually on its own doesn't amount to anything. Look, there are some issues here that I think are stories. I just don't think this is one of them.
Just
I'm sorry.
answer me this. What does Lord Ali want?
I think, look, I'll tell you, Bev, honestly, I've only met him once. I thought he was perfectly pleasant. I think that he just wanted Labour to get into power.
Why?
Because he wants a Labour government.
No, that's not good enough. That's not.
What do you mean that's not good enough? We have to ask him, Bev. I don't know. Look, there is no evidence. Look, I think this is an innuendo. There is no evidence that he wanted any kind of special sort of hobby horse access or special interest. Look, we do have a problem in this country with lobbying. I'm sure you'll agree with that, Michelle, as well.
£500,000 no, look, Labour understand. He doesn't want anything back.
Matthew Talbot said at the start of the show that he spoke to somebody who said what Lord Ali wanted was access. Access. Don't use our democracy for your access, which might benefit what? His businesses?
There's no evidence that he would have
wanted.
I don't know.
I need to know why he wants access.
Then we need to have a much more rigorous system of politics where we either don't have donations or we have far more sort of public money poured into politics.
Well,
but we can't have it both ways.
I can just tell you, in all the years I've been writing about politics, I do not ever recall a donor being given unfettered access to number 10.
I'm not sure it was unfettered access.
It was all access.
He doesn't have a pass anymore.
Oh, that's all right then, because he's been found out.
There's no evidence that there was anything nefarious going on.
When it was reported in the public.
I mean, look, Michelle, you know full well, in the Downing Street of Boris Johnson, there were all kinds of people going through those doors. And
I've never heard of a story like this where one individual has given a substantial amount at a personal level as well as a professional level, and then received that access.
Boris Johnson tried to make his wife his chief of staff. I mean, there was all kinds of stuff that was going on.
Because he's worth 200 million quid. If he was worth £20,000, he would not have that access. It's because he's worth.
Well, of course, we know the money in politics.
We've got to move on.
I'm sorry, the phrase I keep coming back to time and time again is champagne socialists. I didn't really know what that was until now.
I'm not sure you do now, to be honest.
We've got to move on. Time for the headlines now with Tatiana Sanchez.
Good morning. The top stories. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has told the Israeli military to keep fighting with full force in Lebanon, according to his office. Earlier today, the IDF said Israel hit 75 Hezbollah targets overnight in the Bekaa region close to Syria. Netanyahu's statement comes after the UK, the US and other allies called for a 21-day ceasefire between Israel and the terror group Hezbollah. Last night, in a joint statement, the 12-strong bloc called for a ceasefire to provide space for diplomacy towards the conclusion of a diplomatic settlement, as well as a ceasefire in Gaza. They said the hostilities were intolerable and presented an unacceptable risk of a broader regional escalation that was neither in the interest of the people of Israel or Lebanon. It comes after Israel's military chief told troops yesterday that extensive airstrikes in Lebanon targeting Hezbollah could pave the way for them to enter enemy territory. A man's been charged with the murder of a 15-year-old boy who was stabbed with a zombie knife in south-east London. Deshaun Campbell died from his injuries after being attacked in Woolwich on Sunday evening. 18-year-old Jacob Loswich has been charged in connection with his death. He was remanded in custody and appears at Bromley Magistrates Court this morning. Two 12-year-old boys found guilty of murdering teenager Sean Sisahai in a random machete attack are set to be sentenced. The killers were convicted in June of murdering the 19-year-old who was stabbed in the heart and suffered a skull fracture in November last year. They're believed to be the youngest defendants convicted of murder in Britain since Robert Thompson and John Venables, both aged 11, who were found guilty in 1993 of killing 2-year-old James Bulger. The boys, both now 13, face a mandatory juvenile life sentence and are due to appear in custody at Nottingham Crown Court today for the start of a 2-day hearing. The sentence is due to be passed tomorrow. And flooding and travel disruptions set to continue across large parts of the country with more heavy rain predicted. Nearly 3 inches of rain could fall over several hours in the worst affected regions today. The Met Office has issued 3 separate yellow rain alerts, one in western parts of Northern Ireland, one in northern England and another for a large area covering most of England and Wales. The Met Office says the highest rainfall totals are likely across the Pennines and North York moors, where 80 to 100 millimetres could accumulate. There's also the chance. Latest GB News headlines for now. I'm Tatiana Sanchez. More from me in half an hour.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Troll.
Yeah.
Really, you can't say anything. People get offended.
Yeah.
We've lost our British sense of humour.
91. Well, she'll be upset with me saying that.
Yes, I don't.
Oh. She's amazing, though, isn't she? Look at her. Amazing. Right, more of that to come. This is Britain's Newsroom on GB News.
Morning. Welcome to your latest weather update from the Met Office. Here on GB News, we are expecting the rain to cause further issues over the next day and a half. Further heavy rain today, tonight and tomorrow morning is expected to cause further flooding. Met Office warnings are in place. Check the Met Office website or app for full details. Particularly wet today over northeast England, parts of Northern Ireland, North Wales, also seeing some heavy downpours. And in the south, a bit more showery in nature. There'll be some brighter spells, but here too, some heavy downpours are likely. Much of Scotland looking dry, some sunny spells on the west coast. It's quite cool here. Temperatures elsewhere struggling in the mid-teens, feeling pretty chilly with that persistent rain and the winds coming in from the North Sea over northeast England and the far southeast of Scotland. Further south, we will see some sunny spells through the day, but there'll still be some heavy downpours around as the rain builds up here, particularly tonight and tomorrow. The potential for further flooding, a wet zone over North Wales and northern England. As I said, looking a little drier across the southwest of Scotland. A scattering of showers in northern Scotland with that northerly wind bringing a chill. The wet weather this morning should clear away from Northern Ireland, but likely to linger in North Wales, Northern England well into this evening, and then we're looking at some heavier bursts of rain developing over the Midlands and Southern England and South Wales as we go through the night. Because it's been so wet this week, that is likely to cause some further flooding issues through the night and first thing in the morning. Temperatures just about holding up in double figures tonight, but further north it is turning colder. The northerly winds pushing the rain away, but also introducing a cooler feel. Some good spells of sunshine tomorrow over central and southern Scotland, a much brighter day over northeast England. The rain should also finally clear from southern parts after a wet start. So many areas becoming dry and bright by the afternoon, but also noticeably fresher with the winds coming down from the north. A distinctly cooler feel with temperatures struggling to get into the mid-teens. Many places only 11 or 12 Celsius. Bye for now.
The latest GB News travel.
Good morning, I'm Russell Holding. Train services are suspended between Carlisle and both Glasgow Central and Edinburgh Waverley after something got caught in the overhead wires. County Down, the A48 is closed along Moat Street at Donegal because of a fallen tree. On the M6 in Cheshire, there's a lane closed northbound between junctions 18 and 19 towards Knutsford after an accident. There are long delays towards there. In Powys, the A483 is closed each way at Llanelwith because of an accident. Train services are suspended southbound from Gloucester to Swindon after a freight train broke down. The M25 in Essex is closed anti-clockwise from junction 28 for the A12 and 27 for the M11, with two lanes closed clockwise through queues each way from the Dartford tunnels and from junction 26 at Waltham Abbey. And the M2 in Kent's closed westbound at junction 1 at Strood after an accident. There are queues from junction 3, with the A2 closed eastbound towards there from Tollgate services at Gravesend.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website gbnews.com.
Hello, you're watching Britain's Newsroom with me, Andrew Pearce, and Bev Turner. But as you can see, I'm not in the studio, and I've finally escaped from the Labour Party conference. I'm in London speaking to Hollywood royalty, Dame Joan Collins. This is a great moment for GB News, Dame Joan, because you've never graced our station with your presence.
Well, I haven't, but you're pretty new, aren't you? You've only been on for like, what, 3-4 years?
Not even that much, but but we feel, I think people feel established already. But I'm talking to you because I'm one of the lucky ones. I'm going to see your show, Behind the Shoulder Pads, one night only at the Adelphi Theatre, October the 22nd. You're talking about your extraordinary life. Stage, screen, published author, 19 books, TV, most important.
Yeah.
Is there anyone who's managed to straddle, 7-8 decades in showbiz and still be at the top?
Yes, I was thinking about that the other day because somebody said, you know, the last of good. There is a Shirley MacLaine.
Sure.
She started at the same time as me.
Right.
Sophia Loren.
Yeah.
She started around the same time.
She's not working much, though.
It's true, she's not, but she's still out there being,
Yeah.
you know, a major icon. And of course, people like Dick Van Dyke,
Yeah.
who's just almost 100.
Yeah, he's
but,
incredible,
you know,
isn't he?
I'm a mere babe next to him.
You are. But and I was thinking about, you've written some extraordinary, wicked, waspish diaries, which of course you can because you've worked with so many people. Look at the names: Frank Sinatra, Lana Turner, Elizabeth
Dean
Taylor,
Martin,
Gregory Peck,
Richard Burton,
Paul Newman. The list goes
Gene
on
Kelly,
and on. And
my
Gene Kelly.
favourite.
Was he your favourite?
Yes.
Why?
Because I saw him in a movie when I was a little girl called For Me and My Gal with Judy Garland, and I just fell in love with him. It's such a cute movie. Well, they don't make movies like that anymore. And then I was lucky enough when I first went to Hollywood at age 20 to meet him and literally hang out with him and his friends. And then I put him in a movie with me that I produced. He played my husband in a movie called Sins. And he was wonderful. He was really wonderful.
And sometimes, I guess, you get to meet some of these people and there must be a disappointment.
Yes.
Are you going to tell us about the disappointing ones?
Well, I could, Andrew, darling, but I think I'll do that when we have one of our lunches.
OK, fine. I know of many people that you've worked with that you've always had a soft spot for Paul Newman.
Yes.
Why so?
Because, first of all, he's the most wonderful actor. Very underrated at many years because he was so good looking.
Yeah.
Second of all, he was a great friend, a really good friend. And third, because he really supported me tremendously to get a role in a movie called Rally Round the Flag Boys, which I really wanted to do because it was a comedy. And I always thought that I was good in comedy. And the studio wanted Jane Mansfield because they said, brunettes aren't funny, blondes are funny, we got to have Jane. And Paul said, no, we got to have Joan. And well, he was just wonderful.
But you have seen, I mean, you've been described so many times as one of the world's most beautiful women, one of the world's most photographed. I mean, how many front cover magazines have you been on in your time? Can you remember?
I
roughly?
can't. No, I can't. I know I did my first one at 17 as a model, and I did my last one last month for Harper's Bazaar, which is a fabulous cover. And you've seen my house.
I have.
With lots of it. I think it must be over 2,000 or 3,000. I don't know, because so many I never saw.
Right.
Because when we were doing Dynasty, we'd do covers, you know, Linda and John and I, and they'd appear in Sweden and Norway and Germany. Yeah, we never saw
Linda, John and I, and of course, you didn't really like him, did you? Blake.
Well, he didn't really like me, Andrew.
Right.
You know,
so the on-screen aggro, which was great, we all enjoyed it, but off-screen it wasn't great either, was it?
It wasn't, but then you can't always like all your people that you work with. I got along really well with John James, with Emma Sams, with Pamela Bellwood, and of course Stephanie Beacham. And I didn't really hit it off with John and Linda. We just didn't have the same blood group, as they say.
Yeah. I read something about you in Dynasty the other day about all the clothes.
Yes.
And of course, all the clothes and the personal dresses and all that. And you made some waspish reference, I think, to our own Prime Minister.
Well, I thought it was witty.
Yeah.
But if you call it waspish,
I love
that's
waspish.
all right. They said, so did you get to keep any of the clothes? And I said, well, some of them, just like our Prime Minister.
Let's carry on talking about, I mean, Dynasty made you, I mean, you'd been working for many years anyway, but it made you an international star. You won a Golden Globe.
Yeah, a Golden Globe, a People's Choice, 2 Golden Globes, actually.
Right.
I won one for Best Newcomer of 1958 or something like that.
Oh, did you?
Yeah.
Good for you.
Yeah, so I won another one in the 80s.
Yeah. And were they the best years, the Dynasty years?
In terms of my success as an actress, of course.
Yeah.
In terms of my personal life, an absolute disaster.
Because?
Well, I went through 2 divorces, and my daughter was recovering from a serious accident.
That's Katie.
And yes, and I had another marriage that was a disaster. But I had many friends. I mean, I was a great friend of Nolan Miller. he was one of my besties, like you.
Yeah, he was one of the clothes guy, wasn't he?
He did all the clothes, yes, and we collaborated with all, we would copy photographs of Princess Diana from the magazines, and I would say, I really like this Astrakhan hat with a muff, let's wear that when I go to Moldavia, and they would make it, they would run it up in 2 days. It was amazing.
Yeah. Your wardrobe is extraordinary today, isn't it?
Well, it is extraordinary when you look at Dynasty.
Yeah.
And I don't remember half the things I wear. I do know that they put me in a lot of really horrible, very unflattering hats.
Yeah. Have you ever watched the series from beginning to end?
We did during COVID.
Right.
There was nothing else to do, Andrew, as you know.
Yeah.
And there was not much on TV.
Yeah.
So we started to watch it, and I was fascinated. I thought it was a great show, because most of the episodes I hadn't seen.
Sure, because you were always working.
Well, no, not that. We didn't have. I would leave America and come back here because my family was here, and I wouldn't see the episodes.
Right.
So it was like watching a new show.
Yeah, and it was Dynasty versus Dallas. It was always Dynasty for me.
And then we won for a season.
You did.
We got ahead of them.
Yeah. But then after Dynasty, you had a great career back on stage. I remember seeing you in Private Lives in London, and it was in the United States too.
Yeah, we toured America, and then I was on Broadway, which was, of course, is the epitome.
Yeah.
The two things that theatre actors want to do, which is what I wanted to be, is the West End and Broadway, and I did both of them, which was fantastic.
We're going to go to the break in a moment, but tell me before we go to the break, Elizabeth Taylor.
Yes.
You worked with her, I think, in her last film?
Yes, These Old Broads.
These Old Broads, and that was also with Shirley MacLaine? Was it
Shirley and Debbie Reynolds.
What an extraordinary lineup.
I know, it was. What a terrible title, though.
Well, These Old Broads, I know. So a man obviously came up with that.
Yeah, they did. I said, you've got to call it These Fabulous Broads.
Yeah.
But they wouldn't.
And when you got married at one point, didn't you get a message from Elizabeth Taylor?
I did. After I got my third divorce, I got a little message from her, and she sent over a lovely present saying, I'm still ahead by 3. Because
Dame Elizabeth Taylor talking to Dame Joan Collins.
The Britain I grew up in was the most peaceful, gentle society that has ever existed. That has been destroyed.
Opinion polls show immigration is the #1 concern to the British public. Are you proud to be British?
Yeah, I'm ever so proud.
My name is Stephen Edgington, and in this documentary, I want to find out how Britain became a nation of immigrants. Immigration, the truth, available at gbnews.com.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
There's a huge financial and mental strain for parents, but we have this system now where it talks about they bringing a family member to help, but I don't think that's happening a lot of the time. I think people are having to be off work, look after their child, and often, sorry to say, but their school always calls the mum, and then you have this situation where you have nobody to look after your child. People's grandparents don't seem to want to do it so much, and often family members aren't just down the road, so what we have is no village. And I think it's really important when you have a child that you need that village.
Are children getting more sicker than they used to be, or is it just that we take the odd sniffle a bit more seriously now since 2020?
Yes, I do think the odd sniffle can be. I know in my school they say 3 days away, you know, the slightest little thing, and it's like...
If you have a cold?
Yeah, no, please, go in, yeah. And
3 days off if you have a cold for a child, and we wonder why all these parents aren't at work. I think some of these figures about people who could be working and aren't working, they're not necessarily on benefits, but some of them will be people who, during the pandemic, particularly parents, decided to get a different work-life balance. They quite liked being at home, and they realised the children are benefiting from it. Do you think those people are in these statistics, Annette?
Of people staying at home with not working?
Who decided to not go back to work of working age?
Yes, I think a lot of people don't want to go into an office anymore either. They've had that little bit of freedom and they're like, I'm not going in. And I know employers are trying to get them to go in, but they just want to be at home. They want to be near their children if their children are sick, whether that's the mum or the dad. And also a lot of people don't live near their office or wherever. They don't want to commute. Train fares have gone up, so they say, well, why should I pay? So you have this whole knock-on effect throughout the economy.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Your lunchtime update on the stories that matter across the UK.
From breaking news and insightful analysis, inspiring stories and lively debates.
You're comparing yourself to a former Prime Minister.
Which is it? Stay informed, stay updated, stay entertained.
I just don't know how anyone would not want to be there.
Every weekday from midday.
We are Good Afternoon Britain, only on GB News.
Britain's news channel.
This is Britain's Newsroom on GB News. It's 10:51. Now, pharmacy closures across the country are having a huge impact on the elderly, with over 430 closing their doors last year alone. So we're joined now by the Chief Executive of the Association of Independent Multiple Pharmacies, Dr. Layla Hanbeck. Good morning, Dr. Layla. We know how important pharmacies are. We talk about it regularly on this show. What pressure are they under? Why are 430 of them closing their doors every year?
They're under immense amount of pressure because for some years our funding has been stagnated whilst all the costs have been rising. And so many pharmacies are finding themselves in huge amount of debt. We know, for example, that the cost of medicines are going up and every other cost is going up, but our contract has remained the same since 5 years. So that contract came to an end of March, and we've been waiting for the government and officials to offer us a new contract with better prospects because of the way that every other cost has gone up, but we haven't heard anything yet. And as we are waiting, more and more pharmacies are closing the doors for good.
And this comes at a time, Dr. Layla, of course, when the government is putting pressure on pharmacies to do more because so few people can manage to get in to see a GP, so they want pharmacies to take up a lot of that slack.
Yes, absolutely. We have the Pharmacy First scheme, for example, that we are offering, many other services. And we've always been there for patients, and we've kept our doors open throughout, allowing patients to have that accessibility to current pharmacies. But unfortunately, because of the lack of funding, we are under a huge amount of pressure. And the reports that we've heard today from HealthWatch is that a lot of elderly people, vulnerable people, people in areas of deprivation are going to be suffering when those community pharmacies close the doors for good.
And this is because of the discrepancy between what you're buying the drugs for and what the government are refunding you. That's the bottom line.
Yes, that's part of it, but there are loads of other things as well. So, for example, our staff costs, minimum wage, everything else has gone up. Energy, costs of fuel for delivering medicines, everything has gone up apart from our funding. And I'm keen to say that over 90% of what community pharmacies are NHS-related activities. So we're part of the NHS.
OK, we've been beaten by the clock, unfortunately, but always good to get news of pharmacies out there. Dr. Hanbeck there.
This government's got to get a grip of this. It's a real problem. Now, Dame Joan Collins, what's coming up next on this show?
There's lots more still to come on Britain's Newsroom with Andrew Pearce. But first, let's see the weather forecast.
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Morning, welcome to your latest weather update from the Met Office. Here on GB News, we are expecting the rain to cause further issues over the next day and a half. Further heavy rain today, tonight and tomorrow morning is expected to cause further flooding. Met Office warnings are in place. Check the Met Office website or app for full details. Particularly wet today over northeast England, parts of Northern Ireland, North Wales, also seeing some heavy downpours. And in the south, a bit more showery in nature. There'll be some brighter spells, but here too, some heavy downpours are likely. Much of Scotland looking dry, some sunny spells on the west coast. It's quite cool here. Temperatures elsewhere struggling in the mid-teens, feeling pretty chilly with that persistent rain and the winds coming in from the North Sea over northeast England and the far southeast of Scotland. Further south, we will see some sunny spells through the day, but there'll still be some heavy downpours around as the rain builds up here, particularly tonight and tomorrow. The potential for further flooding, a wet zone over North Wales and northern England. As I said, looking a little drier across the southwest of Scotland. A scattering of showers in northern Scotland with that northerly wind bringing a chill. The wet weather this morning should clear away from Northern Ireland, but likely to linger in North Wales, northern England well into this evening, and then we're looking at some heavier bursts of rain developing spreading over the Midlands and southern England and South Wales as we go through the night. Because it's been so wet this week, that is likely to cause some further flooding issues through the night and first thing in the morning. Temperatures just about holding up in double figures tonight, but further north it is turning colder. The northerly winds pushing the rain away, but also introducing a cooler feel. Some good spells of sunshine tomorrow over central and southern Scotland, a much brighter day over northeast England. The rain should also finally clear from southern parts after a wet start. So many areas becoming dry and bright by the afternoon, but also noticeably fresher with the winds coming down from the north. A distinctly cooler feel with temperatures struggling to get into the mid-teens. Many places only 11 or 12 Celsius. Bye for now.
That warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
There's an incredible £36,000 to be won in the Great British Giveaway. That's like having an extra £3,000 each month to play with. And because it's totally tax-free, you get to keep every penny and spend it however you like. We could be paying for your entire year until 2025. How amazing would that be? For another chance to win £36,000 in tax-free cash, text cash to 63232. One entry costs £2 plus one standard network rate message, or text bonus to 63232. 5 entries cost £5 plus one standard network rate message. You can enter online at gbnews.com/win. Entries cost £2, or post your name and number to GB08, PO Box 8690, Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 5 p.m. on the 25th of October. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
Hi there, I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm going to take a second to tell you all about my show, Jubes & Co. We start off with the issues of the day. We then bring in both sides of the arguments. We get rid of the disrespect. And then you throw me into the mix. And trust me, I'll tell it exactly how it is. And then, of course, the magic ingredient, you at home. We mix it all together and what have we got, in my opinion, the best debate show in town. Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Welcome to State of the Nation, daily plunge into the stories shaping our country. I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, and Monday to Thursday we bring you the insights, the facts, the truth about how our country is being governed. Because what happens in Downing Street matters down your street. Tune in to State of the Nation every Monday to Thursday, 8 to 9 o'clock. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
It's Patrick Christie's Tonight, and here we do things differently. It's explaining the absolute madness of this, doesn't it? It's explosive. I mean, this is very good. It's lively.
850. Your government sat there, Sean, and it did nothing.
It's controversial. And the Middle East has been in turmoil since before I was born. It's everything you need to kickstart your evening. Everyone's had their Weetabix tonight. I love to see it. That's Patrick Christie's Tonight, weeknights from 9 p.m. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Are the newspapers getting you down?
My wife didn't divorce me that month.
Struggling to separate the wheat from the chaff?
I know that it's a bit of a circus at the best of times.
Well, don't worry. Headliners has got you covered. We'll take the burden of reading the day's news, and if we get depressed, who cares? It's an occupational hazard, frankly. That's Headliners on GB News from 11 p.m. till midnight, and the following morning, 5 till 6 a.m. on GB News, the comedy channel. Nah, just kidding. Britain's news channel.
Morning, 11 a.m. on Thursday, the 26th of September. Live across the UK, this is Britain's Newsroom with Andrew Pearce and Bev Turner.
Wearing masks and working from home if we can really will help prevent infections.
That broadcast during the pandemic, telling you to work from home if you can, was not in his own home. Guess whose house he was in? That's right, Labour donor Lord Ali's £18 million penthouse.
It's a very curious story. And prisoners been freed by mistake? The government under fire again as dozens of convicts are let out of jail early. Olivia Utley has more.
The early release scheme for prisoners was always controversial, and this story proves it might be disastrous. Find out more with me very soon.
And we all know it, there is a shoplifting surge. The Co-op itself has taken a £40 million hit in the first half of this year. Their top boss has warned we are in the epidemic of retail crime.
And we're going to bring you the second part of our interview with the Hollywood icon Dame Joan Collins and hear about her words on woke.
I think it's gone out of control.
Yeah.
Really, you can't say anything, people get offended.
Yeah.
We've lost our British sense of humour. You're watching Britain's Newsroom. Here's your news headlines.
Good morning. The top story. Some breaking news. The current managing director of Harrods, Michael Ward, has said in a statement that it's clear the former Harrods boss, Mohammed Al Fayed, presided over a toxic culture of secrecy, intimidation, fear of repercussion and sexual misconduct. Mr Ward, who worked for Al Fayed for 4 years at Harrods, said he was not aware of his criminality and abuse, adding that we failed our colleagues and for that we are deeply sorry. Many of the women interviewed for the BBC documentary and podcast Al Fayed, Predator at Harrods, said they were sexually assaulted, including rape by Al Fayed, who died last year at the age of 94. Our other top story today, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has told the Israeli military to keep fighting with full force in Lebanon, according to his office. Earlier, the IDF said Israel hit 75 Hezbollah targets overnight in the Bekaa region close to Syria. Netanyahu's statement comes after the UK, the US and other allies called for a 21-day ceasefire between Israel and the terror group Hezbollah. Last night, in a joint statement, the 12-strong bloc called for a ceasefire to provide space for diplomacy towards the conclusion of a diplomatic settlement, as well as a ceasefire in Gaza. They said the hostilities were intolerable and presented an unacceptable risk of a broader regional escalation that was neither in the interest of the people of Israel or Lebanon. It comes after Israel's military chief told troops yesterday that extensive airstrikes in Lebanon targeting Hezbollah could pave the way for them to enter enemy territory. Former chair of the Defence Select Committee, Tobias Elwood, believes a ceasefire is imminent.
I think it will happen in the next 72 hours. It takes some time. This is a very complex operation to get the scale of troop numbers that are required, although I'm sure the IDF, the Israeli Defense Forces, would have been preparing for this for some time.
2 12-year-old boys found guilty of murdering teenager Sean C. Sahai in a random machete attack are set to be sentenced. The killers were convicted in June of murdering the 19-year-old, who was stabbed in the heart and suffered a skull fracture in November last year. They're believed to be the youngest defendants convicted of murder in Britain since Robert Thompson and John Venables, both aged 11, who were found guilty in 1993 of killing 2-year-old James Bulger. The boys, both now 13, face a mandatory juvenile life sentence and are due to appear in custody at Nottingham Crown Court today for the start of a 2-day hearing. The sentence is due to be passed tomorrow. A man's been charged with the murder of a 15-year-old boy who was stabbed with a zombie knife in south-east London. Deshaun Campbell died from his injuries after being attacked in Woolwich on Sunday evening. 18-year-old Jacob Loswich has been charged in connection with his death. He was remanded in custody and appears at Bromley Magistrates Court this morning. A family centre based in the Southport building where 3 young girls died in a knife attack will not return to the premises. Heartspace, which ran groups for new mothers and families, had been based at the Norwood Business Centre in the town's Hart Street. Founder Jenny Scholes said staff would never forget the events of July 29th and were heartbroken by what happened. Children had been taking part in a Taylor Swift-themed dance class at the venue when a knife attacker killed 6-year-old B.B. King, 7-year-old Elsie Stankham and 9-year-old Alice Da Silva Aguirre. The building's understood to have remained closed ever since. Cyber attackers have caused disruption at 19 UK railway stations. Network Rail confirmed the Wi-Fi systems at stations including London Euston, Manchester Piccadilly and major stations across Liverpool, Birmingham and Edinburgh were all affected. People reported logging onto the Wi-Fi at the stations, being met with a screen about terror attacks in Europe. British Transport Police are investigating. The rail provider says it believes other organisations, not just rail stations, have also been impacted. A landmark AUKUS meeting is being held in the UK today as the Defence Secretary John Healey hosts counterparts from the US and Australia in London amid efforts to build a fleet of nuclear-powered submarines. Mr Healey will host Richard Marles, who's also Anthony Albanese's Deputy Prime Minister, and US Defence Secretary Lloyd James Austin III at the Security Partnership meeting. If Australia and the UK sign a treaty, the Westminster government's estimated the SSN AUKUS submarine build project would unlock UK exports into the billions of pounds. The Ministry of Defence says it'll support UK jobs for more than 21,000 people. And the government also confirmed the new treaty will outline the UK's relationship with Australia on submarine cooperation. And flooding and travel disruptions set to continue across large parts of the UK with more heavy rain predicted. Nearly 3 inches of rain could fall over several hours in the worst affected regions today. The Met Office has issued 3 separate yellow rain alerts, one in western parts of Northern Ireland, one in Northern England and another for a large area covering most of England and Wales. The Met Office says the highest rainfall totals are likely across the Pennines and Norfolk Moors, where 80 to 100 millimetres could accumulate. There's also the chance of thunderstorms and strong winds in the southern half of the UK later on in the day. And those are the latest GB News headlines for now. I'm Tatiana Sanchez. More from me in half an hour.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Welcome back to Britain's Newsroom, live across the UK on GB News with Andrew and Bev.
Well, Number 10 has admitted that 37 prisoners were released by mistake. Several of them have still not been returned to jail. The area has been blamed on problems with the government's controversial early release scheme. Of course, it's because of that.
Absolutely. Justice Secretary Shabana Mahmood is considering letting out prisoners early if they behave themselves to tackle overcrowding. Let's get a bit more on this from our political correspondent Olivia Utley, who is in the studio with us. Olivia, it's lovely to see you. We haven't seen you in the studio for a while. So how much of a problem is this proving to be? Because there are people literally on social media who are calling for Keir Starmer's resignation over the fact that these prisoners were released early.
Well, it was obviously a hugely controversial scheme to release prisoners by default after 40% of their sentence rather than 50% of their sentence. And to compound the problem, it was implemented very, very quickly, some would say rushed through. And there were lots of parole officers registering their concern that there just simply wasn't enough time. The idea was first mooted during the election campaign in July, and prisoners were actually released on the 10th of September. And now we discover that 37 prisoners have been wrongly released. 5 of them, they're still being tracked down to go back to prison. And allegedly, one of them has already reoffended. The reason why they were released early, I mean, basically it was because it was all rushed through, but they were... it's a complicated technicality, but essentially some people who weren't eligible for early release were released early. And that is, of course, the danger which lots and lots of people were raising.
And, Olivia, they made it absolutely clear when they were doing this that nobody convicted of domestic violence would be released early, because the victims will be very worried that they're going to get a knock on the door late at night. And that's exactly what's happened.
That's exactly what's happened. And the problem was with this early release scheme that there's a bit of a grey area between violent offences, which weren't eligible for early release, and non-violent offences. I mean, that sounds mad. How could there possibly be a grey area? But people who were convicted of offences which were non-violent but had also committed violent offences, possibly at the same time, were on the wrong list, basically, which meant that people got released early. I mean, the Labour Party would argue that they had no choice but to do this because the Conservatives, they say, had left prisons in such a dire state. Overcrowding was turning out to be a big problem. And I mean, that is true. Overcrowding was certainly a problem. At one point, about 6 weeks ago, there were only 150 places left in male prisons. But the fact that this was pushed through so quickly does seem to have led to some problems.
I just don't know why they don't kick out 10,500 foreign prisoners and deport them. Why do we want them in our jails? Kick them out. Prison crisis, sorted.
That would be another option. Keir Starmer is looking at lots and lots of ideas to tackle this problem. One idea which the Times is reporting on today is doing something like they do in Texas, where you can be released early, basically on good behaviour. So you can earn credits through going to drug rehabilitation schemes or educational courses in prison. And those courses count as days of credit towards your time served. In Texas, you can get out of prison after serving just 25% of your sentence, and that can include days of credit earned from these courses. So if the Prime Minister looks at that, there could be another big controversy on our hands. What I find quite interesting about this is the Labour Party is sort of claiming this has all been done by necessity, and you can see that perhaps there is a necessity to do something about the overcrowding problem. But the Prisons Minister, James Timpson, actually also has an ideological opposition, fundamentally opposed to people spending long spells in prison. So is this about necessity, or is it sort of ideological under the guise of necessity?
I wonder if the Prisons Minister's ever been a victim of crime, because he might take a different view if you've been mugged or burgled, because he may not think burglary is important. People who are burgled, it's a terrible, traumatic experience. And we want these people banged up so they don't carry on reoffending.
Yeah, and that's going to be a debate that's, I think, going to be raging in the Labour Party over the next few months and years, because there are certainly those within the Labour Party who I've spoken to, Labour MPs, who fundamentally disagree with James Timpson about this and do believe that prisons should be there, yes, for rehabilitation, but also for punishment.
Yeah. To keep our streets safe.
Yeah.
Just before you let me go, this very bizarre story about Wahid Ali and the Prime Minister speaking from his home, but trying to make us hoodwink us into thinking he was in his own home during COVID when he was telling us all to work from home.
Well, this is a fascinating story. Keir Starmer came out over the last few days, was using this penthouse of Lord Ali's in £18 million penthouse in Covent Garden. He claimed that he was using it recently so that his son could revise for his GCSEs in peace during the general election campaign. It's now also emerged that Keir Starmer was using this penthouse apartment during the COVID pandemic, and he actually released a video talking about the dangers of Omicron, the necessity for working from home from this apartment. To make matters weirder, behind Keir Starmer in this video, there are framed family photos of the Starmer children and Christmas cards.
To make it look like it was his home.
To make it look like it was his home. And the work from home directive during the pandemic, I don't think that was about working from other people's homes.
No.
It doesn't really feel like the story's going to go away.
No, I think he's got a problem, because everybody wants to know, texting in and emailing, what did Lord Ali want?
And also, I can't have Olivia here without saying congratulations, because we got our first GBNews baby on the way. I am so excited for you, Olivia. I gave her a massive hug when I saw it this morning. I've been dying to see.
And it could be a Christmas Day baby.
It's due on Christmas Day.
You're feeling well.
Feeling really good,
blooming,
yeah.
and, you know, just amazing. We wish you...
Fabulous news.
Thank you very much.
Now, up next, find out how much a couple were fined by the police for reporting a migrant who was hiding in their van on the French border. Has the world gone completely mad? Sounds like it. This is Britain's Newsroom on GB News.
I'm Christopher Hope. From pop stars to politicians, I'll interview anybody in a pub who's got a political opinion. Join me every Friday on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube or gbnews.com, or wherever you get your podcasts. This is GB News, the People's Channel.
GB News Breakfast, every day from 6 a.m.
Good morning, everybody. I honestly don't think Gen Z are as lazy as we've been made out. I was on GB News a couple of months ago talking about a report which suggested that they were very lazy, very work shy, and I honestly don't think that's the case. I respect my elders, so I'm certainly not going to sit here and blame them for the slow return to many offices across the country. But I am actually 20. I've run businesses since I was 15 and 16, since I dropped out of school, and I have always been pro-office, right? So I fit right into that Generation Z category, and I think the office environment is fantastic, not just professionally but socially for young people, especially kind of after COVID, and it halted a lot of their social plans or people going to university, etc. I think getting people into the office, being surrounded by the more senior people, the people with more experience, which is what we're talking about, older people, is actually incredibly positive. But I think Generation Z get a lot of stick in the media, and I'm often sat here debating this about them being called lazy. I guess I guess I think probably what's different is technology is advanced, so people's jobs are a lot quicker, and Generation Z have obviously grew up with that technology, therefore in a position to do jobs quicker. And I guess that's kind of where that kind of narrative has come from, because Gen Z do really kind of go with the whole work smarter, not harder kind of mentality, which is often met with a little bit of stick.
I'm not knocking the young generation at all. I mean, I'm just saying it's by experience. Undoubtedly, they're not as hard working as the more experienced worker, but I'm certainly not knocking them on that basis. If they had the opportunity, I'm sure there'd be more and more would want to get into the workplace. But unfortunately, I think this COVID has changed the world, and it's made younger people more lazy than older people. Older people just can't wait to, well, shouldn't say that, can't wait to get out of the house to get to work.
GB News, the People's Channel.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK.
We're ready to keep you up to date with what's happening every half an hour, every single day. Bulletins here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
We're proud to be GB News, the People's Channel. And as you know, we always love to hear your views. Now, there's a new way of getting in touch with us at gbnews.com/yoursay. By commenting, you can be part of a live conversation and join our GB News community. You can even talk to me, Bev Turner, or any of the members of the GB News family.
I think it's gone out of control.
Yeah.
Really. You can't say anything. People get offended.
Yeah.
We've lost our British sense of humour.
Dame Joan Collins with her words on woke. We'll hear more from her shortly. Extended interview with her.
We're joined by former Culture Secretary Michelle Donnellan in the studio again, and journalist Jonathan Liss. Jonathan, let's talk first of all about what's happening over at the UN. The Israeli Foreign Minister rejecting a Lebanese ceasefire proposal.
Yeah, I think there's a proposal by the United States and the EU. Our Prime Minister was in New York, obviously, as well, for the UN. And this is clearly not just a matter of great concern for the countries involved, but for the wider region and for the global community, because this has the risk of sparking a major conflagration with broader regional escalation and beyond. You already have the war with Hamas, which has been grinding on for almost a year now. And this sort of gradual increase in hostilities between Hezbollah in Lebanon and Israel, which has just escalated dramatically in the last few days. And you had the biggest single daily loss of life in Lebanon since the end of that brutal, bloody civil war in 1990. And now there's talk about an invasion of Lebanon, which could only spell catastrophe for both sides. There is no world in which this ends well for Israel, because they are no more able to eliminate Hezbollah than they're able to eliminate Hamas. Hezbollah is a lot more organised than Hamas. It's far better armed. It's a lot richer. It has government infrastructure in a way that Hamas doesn't. If they can't eliminate Hamas, they're certainly not going to be able to eliminate Hezbollah. The only solution to this is diplomatic, and that solution will allow people to return to their homes in northern Israel and southern Lebanon.
But there are some suggestions, Michelle, that the military operation against Hezbollah has set Hezbollah back 20 years. So in that sense, for Israel, it's been an effective operation.
Yeah, but I think Jonathan's right about extending this on more fronts will make it harder for Israel. And what is very worrying is about the escalation across the region now. And we're almost at a turning point. And the next few days will determine what is actually going to happen on the ground, what is going to happen to the people. We've already, as a government, the Prime Minister a few days ago has said everybody needs to evacuate out of Lebanon. We're trying to get aid in there as well. Tensions are rising, and this could get much worse over the coming days unless there is a ceasefire. So that is what's being called for, and we will see whether Netanyahu responds accordingly in the coming days. Of course, he's going over to the UN as well, where he's going to be speaking, I think, on Friday. So it would be interesting to watch his words carefully and analyse exactly what he's saying.
Because we know he's going to say that Hezbollah's missiles, bombs, have displaced 60,000 Israelis.
Which they did, and that is very tragic. And the whole conflict that we've seen over the last year has seen a great deal of loss of life, and it's been horrendous. But I think what everybody wants to do is make sure that it doesn't intensify further and cause even more loss of life, and that's why what happens over the coming weeks and days is imperative.
I mean, I think that we also have to bear in mind that, particularly in the United States, Biden has... It's been very strange in the last year that Biden has almost acted like a hand-wringing spectator to what's been happening, rather than a major actor, in the sense that Israel is so dependent on the United States economically, politically, and, of course, militarily. The US could have pulled the plug on this war with Hamas at any time, because of the leverage that the US has over Israel. But they haven't done that. They're sort of just pleading for Israel to act. And Netanyahu has repeatedly humiliated Biden. By Biden, so he keeps on giving him aid, and then Netanyahu sort of, keeps putting his middle finger up at Biden. And so now Biden and the White House are calling for de-escalation, but they have the means to actually enforce that, and they're not doing it.
Right, let's look at this extraordinary story. We've been trailing it this morning. This is about the antiques dealer, Jane Cave. I think she's been on BBC programmes, hasn't she, and her husband. They were fined, Michelle, when a migrant snuck into the back of their car.
It's really interesting because actually they didn't find the migrant until they were in the UK and they'd been through all the checks and somehow it was missed.
Was he in the boot?
Well, I think he was in. Maybe he was in their van. I think,
Right.
but and in the back.
And they had spotted one guy getting in.
they got him out, and then another one got in. Yeah.
So then they told the police about him, but it turns out another one was stowed in the back of their van.
Yeah, and then they were really proactive. They called the police straight away. They tried to get help. They volunteered the information, and they've been clobbered with a fine. And this isn't the first time that we've seen this type of thing happen.
But on what basis were they fined, Michelle?
Well, I think it's ridiculous myself.
Failing to protect the vehicle.
So the whole principle is based on the fact that you have to have personal responsibility over your vehicle and make sure that it's secure, so that, because otherwise you could deny all knowledge, couldn't you? You could say, I didn't know they were in, I did my very best. But in this kind of circumstance, it really falls foul of common sense. And these poor individuals have done their very best, and this person still managed to get in. They've been clobbered with a fine. We've seen many companies in the same situation. In my former constituency, Broad and Transport, were taking legal action because they were facing horrendous fines, doing a lot of work to try and prevent it, and then they were struggling to recruit drivers because of the fact that they can get personal fines, and it's like a bit of a vicious cycle, and they were saying, please help us more. So it is a two-way street. We can't just put all the onus on the individual.
And what happened to the migrant?
I think they were caught within minutes, so they're not at large. They were caught, detained.
Yeah, so they got through French border control, passport control, Jonathan. They were waved through, the vehicle was waved through during that inspection. And then they said, we heard banging on the side. I wasn't sure where it was coming from. His wife called the police. He checked the back of the van. There was a young man inside. He called the police to say, I've got someone in the back of the van.
Exactly what you're supposed to do.
Come here and arrest them. He got out, ran away. They did, as you say, find the guy. Just make it make sense for me, Jonathan.
Well, actually, I think this might be the first time ever that we're on the same side of an immigration story, because this is obviously a completely ludicrous story. It's not whatever stance you take on migration. It's not someone's fault if someone breaks into their vehicle while you're driving. This is not a trafficking operation. They're not, deliberately smuggling someone across the border.
The law by coming into this country.
Well, and look, we can have a conversation, as we have many times in this programme, about our asylum regime and about migration, about whether the government should be offering safe and legal routes for people to come here so they don't have to sneak on the back of vehicles or get into boats that are unseaworthy. But that's not what's happening here. No one should have been fined. And I do think it actually brings the law into disrepute when you are not responsible for something. There's no reasonable way you could have done something and you still get on the wrong end of the law.
You would understand, Michelle, if they said, I'm not paying the fine.
Yeah, you would.
Wouldn't you?
You would. And loads of people will read this story and think, crumbs, I'm not going to make that journey now.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Let me just read you the Home Office spokesman, because there's some brilliant language in this. They say, we are fully committed to stopping people from illegally entering the country and cracking down on people smugglers. The Clandestine Entrant Civil Penalty Scheme.
Good God.
Clandestine Entrant Civil Penalty Scheme aims to ensure that drivers are taking every reasonable step to deter irregular migration and disrupt people smugglers. Honestly.
It is extraordinary. I mean, they should hang their head in shame.
Consider they have to say, so the fines are only issued when they consider they have significant evidence. But, I mean, look, if you're not trying, unless you have the door wide open and sort of people are, with sort of like, you can, I'm going to look the other way if you want to come into the back of the van. I mean, that would be fair enough.
They're not illegal migrants now, they're clandestine entrants.
Right,
listen,
and of course, the Labour government call it irregular migrants.
As they just did, Can we talk about Generation Z? Apparently, Michelle, Generation Z aren't binge drinking alcohol.
Which is really interesting. And I think I saw that we've seen record numbers of deaths from alcohol, up to about 10,000 now. So this is really quite pertinent that it's dramatically reduced in Generation Z.
Yeah.
I'd like to know, are they turning to other substances and other things?
What,
because
like drugs?
Yeah, because obviously if you're swapping one poison, if you like, for another, then actually it's not actually that healthy. But this is a generation that are really into Instagram, social media. Yeah, they're into Instagram, they're into social media, they're into the way that they look. Alcohol is fattening. It can also lead to very uncomfortable pictures and videos of yourself on social media that will stay there for life. So you can kind of understand why they're really getting into this, and they're much more into fitness. So on the whole, this is a really positive story, as long as they're not filling that void with something else.
You only have to walk down any pavement in London, Jonathan, to just smell marijuana being smoked everywhere. That's what this generation are doing.
I'm actually really interested in whether young people are taking more drugs than they did before, because I think that there's a cultural shift. I think it's interesting what you just said, Michelle, about the reasons for it. But generally, Gen Z or Gen Z seems to be a lot more censorious. They're a lot more moralising. You know, if you look at the online Gen Z, they're always sort of, you know, if you're a man, for example, 35, and you're going out with sort of a 25-year-old woman, that's almost seen as abusive and coercive. You know, there's extraordinary judgment laid on people.
Well, that's you in trouble.
There's a bit about, so there's very, very kind of judgmental about sex, and that comes from a good place, because obviously they're very concerned about sort of consent and about sort of, you know, abuse and all that stuff. But there does seem to be a kind of a creeping and moralising, almost like a backlash to some of the maybe more permissive times that we had in our 20s.
But you see, maybe they just are worried about having fun. Because I think Michelle's point about the fact that everything is filmed and everything can be put on social media, they never really let their hair down. And we wonder why they've all got mental health problems, because they can never quite relax. And I'm not suggesting they should all get so relaxed that they end up in a gutter on a Saturday night. That doesn't do anybody any good. That's far too relaxed. But they're all quite buttoned up. They're a bit tense, and that's probably why they all end up smoking marijuana.
And it's probably cheaper to get high on marijuana than it is to get boozed up on booze.
I think it can be, yeah.
Expensive.
But of course you can have fun and you can relax without alcohol or drugs. You know, there are other ways to do that.
Not so much fun, though.
Yeah. I also think we have to be quite careful about generalising about these generations. I'm sure, you know, OK, these stats show that for alcohol in particular, but I think we can be quite quick to generalise about a whole generation. You know, there are people born when I was born that are very different to me, etc. So I'm not sure I completely buy into your analysis of this entire generation.
I'm not saying the entire generation, but you definitely see a difference when you talk to people of our age. We're about the same age, and the attitudes that you have. There seems to be a little bit more kind of liberalism, but kind of a bit more sort of live and let live. When you talk to people, when I talk to, you know, go out and about sort of socially, I've got lots of friends in their 20s. There does seem to be a difference in kind of the way they approach the world. There are sort of far more rules that you have to follow. I won't say the W word, because I know you love that. It's not about wokery, but there's definitely kind of like more.
18 to 24-year-olds, they were 14 and 20 during the pandemic.
Yeah.
You know, they have been brought up to basically, if the government says, you know, get into lockstep, they get into lockstep. They have a kind of fear of authority.
Well, there's a lot of trauma that generation will be carrying through. You know, the people who came of age, who should have been having the time of their lives, around 17, 18, and now sort of in their early 20s and still dealing with that. But then, in a way, you might have expected there to be a backlash in the way that, you know, had after the influenza pandemic of sort of 1990, the Roaring Twenties. That hasn't quite happened.
Yeah, you could have seen it.
Watch this space, Jonathan. It might be around the corner. Right. Oh, we've still got some more time. That's good. Let's talk about prisoners then, Michelle, and them being let out early.
Yeah, so we've seen 37 prisoners let out early by mistake, and I think there's about 5 or 7 still at large, which is really worrying from the public's perspective. And I think it must have been so embarrassing and mortifying for the people that had to contact these individuals and say, oh, sorry, we know that you were allowed to be let out, but by the way, you now need to go back to prison.
There must be
and what a monumental cock-up,
to be honest. You think they might have some legal...
Yeah, they might have recourse.
Sorry, you've let me out.
Yeah, I've got paperwork and documentation. You said I could go. And it makes a mockery of our justice system. And internationally, it looks awful, doesn't it?
There is a really interesting story on the front page of The Times, which is worth discussing as well, about sort of winning points. So Texas, which is not a state you normally associate with kind of liberal or progressive judicial, sort of judicial or sort of penal reform or anything, they had a scheme where they offered sort of points for rehabilitation, not just for good behaviour, but actually to enrol in courses for either drug treatment or vocational educational courses, presumably making sure they weren't just taking the mick and just turning up actually with some kind of accreditation at the end, and you could win actually time off your sentence. So the Justice Secretary is going to Texas to try and find out what they did, if it could be rectified.
But the worry about these prisoners who were released, some of them were violent offenders and were guilty of domestic abuse.
And there was a promise made that they wouldn't be released. And so, that is quite terrifying for the public.
So these women victims of these men are now living in fear and terror. Are these guys about to turn up on their doorstep?
Yes, behind those figures are real human stories, and people really worried.
I mean, one would hope if there's a restraining order out on anybody and they break it, that will result in immediate recall to prison.
Well, one of them's already apparently reoffended. Already.
Reoffended on day one of them.
Look, these things, we always knew these things were going to happen, and we know, that in the last Conservative government there was a desperate defunding of the Ministry of Justice. 43% of all courts closed, huge defunding of the police, and this is the consequence.
Well, we didn't know that prisoners were going to be let out by mistake. I mean, we never knew that.
No, but of course, but certainly, the Justice Department knew that they were going to have to implement the scheme that Shabana Mahmood has done herself.
I still say kick out the foreign prisoners. Sorted. It's sorted. 10,500 of them
just to
out.
kick out the foreign prisoners, Michelle?
I think it's a bit more complicated than that. I think we need to continue with building more prisons, making sure the ones that we've got are in the right state to actually house and be at full capacity. And we do need to focus on rehabilitation, but also on preventative measures as well. And the story Jonathan referenced in relation to Texas is interesting, but the only way that's worked is with a hell of a lot of money to resource it. So we can't replicate that unless we actually invest in something like that. And we got prisoners to actually buy into the scheme. If they just pick these things to get the points, that's not going to work either.
No.
Michelle Donnellan, been lovely to have you. Jonathan Less, we've tolerated you. I love you, really.
I know
I
you
give
do.
him a hard time. You can't see his trousers.
She doesn't.
They're fantastic. That's all we need to know.
Come on, just raise a leg. Raise a leg, Jonathan. Come on. I mean, look.
I mean, would you be seen dead in those?
Well, I'm very much alive.
Did you get those from Lord Ali?
No, I wish. They'd be a lot more expensive, a lot more lucrative.
Typical champagne socialist.
Oh, God, stop saying that all the time.
Honestly, it's never been more true than it is right now.
They were so cheap. The trousers, I tell you what, they're at a tenth the price of your outfit.
My suits from Zara.
Jonathan, we know they're cheap.
Right, anyway, we'll carry on bickering while the very mature Tatiana Sanchez has your news.
Bev, thank you. The top stories this hour. The current managing director of Harrods has apologised and said the business failed our colleagues following sexual misconduct allegations about the former boss, Mohammed Al Fayed. Michael Ward said in a statement, it's clear Mr Al Fayed presided over a toxic culture of secrecy, intimidation, fear of repercussion and sexual misconduct. Mr Ward, who worked for Al Fayed for 4 years, said he was not aware of his criminality and abuse and described it as a shameful period in the business's history. 5 women claim they were raped by Mr Al Fayed, who died last year at the age of 94, with a number of others alleging sexual misconduct. Mr Ward said an independent review was underway into issues arising from the allegations. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has told the Israeli military to keep fighting with full force in Lebanon, according to his office. Earlier today, the IDF said Israel hit 75 Hezbollah targets overnight in the Bekaa region close to Syria. Mr Netanyahu's statement comes after the UK, the US and other allies called for a 21-day ceasefire between Israel and the terror group Hezbollah. Last night, in a joint statement, the 12-strong bloc called for a ceasefire to provide space for diplomacy towards the conclusion of a diplomatic settlement, as well as a ceasefire in Gaza. They said the hostilities were intolerable and presented an unacceptable risk of a broader regional escalation that was neither in the interest of the people of Israel or Lebanon. It comes after Israel's military chief told troops yesterday that extensive airstrikes in Lebanon targeting Hezbollah could pave the way for them to enter enemy territory. A man's been charged with the murder of a 15-year-old boy who was stabbed with a zombie knife in south-east London. Deshaun Campbell was found with a stab injury in Woolwich on Sunday evening and he died at the scene. 18-year-old Jacob Loswich has been charged in connection with his death. He was remanded in custody and appears in court today. And an amber warning for heavy rain has been issued by the Met Office, warning of further flooding and travel disruption across large parts of the UK. This new weather alert covers the Midlands and parts of the southwest from 6 p.m. today until 6 a.m. tomorrow. The Met Office warns nearly 3 inches of rain could fall over several hours in the worst affected regions, with rivers continuing to rise after the rain clears. Several yellow weather warnings are already currently in place for large parts of the country until 9 o'clock tomorrow morning. And those are the latest GB News headlines for now. I'm Tatiana Sanchez. More from me in half an hour.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Up next, Dame Joan Collins. She's got quite a lot to say on wokery, and I think you'll agree with what she says. And do you think this wokery thing has got a bit too much of this wokery?
Good God, yes.
Yeah.
You know I do.
I do.
I think it's gone out of control.
Yeah.
Really. You can't say anything. People get offended.
Yeah.
We've lost our British sense of humour.
Joan Collins, the unmistakable. This is Britain's Newsroom on GB News.
Hi there and welcome to the latest forecast from the Met Office for GB News. Yet more wet weather on the way today and overnight as well, with the risk of flooding in places. There will be some brighter interludes out there, mostly towards the far south of the UK and the far north in between. This frontal system causing persistent wet weather and strong winds, the strongest of the winds expected across parts of northern England into North Wales, 50, 60 mile-per-hour wind gusts. And that wind driving spells of heavy and persistent rain, especially into the Pennines, North York Moors, parts of Northern Ireland, risk of disruption in places by the end of the day. To the south of that, it will be a mild afternoon with some bright spells, but also a lot of showers arriving into southern England, parts of Wales as well. Those showers merge into longer spells of rain through the evening to cause some very wet weather through mid-Wales into the Midlands, parts of East Anglia. Those areas that were badly affected at the weekend could see yet more rain. Rain by this stage easing off across Northern Ireland and Northern England, but continuing in some places. Scotland seeing a brighter day with some sunny spells, but also a few showers coming in on a northerly wind for northern Scotland, and it will feel cold in that northerly. Now into the evening, the rain really intensifies through parts of Wales and the Midlands, and that's why there is a significant risk of flooding in those areas, and it continues for much of the night. It eventually sinks south with the wind strengthening across parts of Wales and into Cornwall by the end of the night, 60, 70 mile-per-hour wind gusts. And then by the end of the night, that rain eventually is pulling away from the south, with the heaviest downpours clearing to the southeast by mid-morning. Brighter skies follow from the north, and it's a much improved picture by the afternoon for many parts of the UK. Having said that, we will have a cold wind arriving from the north across all parts of the UK, and there'll be further showers in 1 or 2 places.
Every Saturday, 10 till 12, we'll bring you all of the news that you need to know. We'll also remind you that there is so much to smile about.
It's my favourite time of the week. I get to relax, enjoy some light-hearted stories, and let Ellie teach me about fashion too.
That's Saturday Morning Live, every Saturday, 10 till 12.
Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Nana Akwe, for an informative, interactive news programme with a difference. It's fun.
No, you didn't say that, Dave.
I'm so surprised.
I think there's an element of truth to that.
Join me from 3 p.m. every weekend, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
The king of breakfast TV is back. That's right, Britain's favourite TV host, Eamon Holmes, returns to Britain's hottest breakfast programme. Breakfast every day from 6 a.m. only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Well, hello and welcome back. You're watching Britain's Newsroom on GB News with me, Andrew Pearce, and Bev Turner. But as you can see, I'm still not back in the studio because I'm still with the Hollywood legend that is the incredible, glamorous Dame Joan Collins. Dame Joan, we're talking about your extraordinary career. You first started acting on stage age 9.
Well, yes, that was my first proper role.
Yeah.
But actually, I went on the stage first, stage 3, in a play called Why the Fairies Cried, that was produced by my dancing school that I was going to. And I got my first review, which said, Joan Collins makes a very believable fairy.
Oh, fantastic. I hope they never say that about me. That would be a terrible thing.
Oh, darling, it would be true.
Now, tell me about the modern world now. It's very fashionable now to call you all actors.
I don't call myself an actor.
You're an actor.
I call, if I'm in a room with some actors and actresses, I call us actors.
Right.
And I do sometimes call myself a jobbing actor, but on the whole, I like to be called an actress.
Yeah.
It's a very pretty word.
Yeah.
It's, and it's feminine, and I consider myself to be feminine and a feminist. And why should we be called female actors? I find it demeaning, frankly.
Yeah. A bit too, and do you think this wokery thing has got a bit too much of this wokery?
Good God, yes.
Yeah.
You know I do.
I do.
I think it's gone out of control.
Yeah.
Really. You can't say anything. People get offended.
Yeah.
We've lost our British sense of humour.
Right.
You know, I grew up with my father going to, because he was an agent for variety halls, and so we would go and we would see outrageous comedians making, you know, jokes about their mother-in-law and fat people. You can't say that now. You can't say any of the stuff.
No.
So I grew up watching those from the age of 11 or 12. Daddy had all these different acts and things that he would do, and it was great fun. And then, of course, as soon as I went to Hollywood, there was Milton Berle, who was the most outrageous comedian and dressed up as a female, and there's no way you could do any of that today. I think, you know, some of the things are fine, but I think we've lost our sense of humour tremendously, don't you?
I do, and I think
I'm
we have
so glad you still got it.
We have to push back at it, and as you know, sometimes I probably say the wrong thing,
and you get hate mail, don't you?
I do get hate mail, but that's fine. We don't mind that. We get used to it. Let's talk about other things, because you've been around a long time, Joan. You've met lots of our prime ministers. You've met lots of presidents of the United States. You met Trump.
Oh, I met Donald a long time ago. He gave a party for me. I had a scent out called, I can't even remember the name of it. Anyway, it was in the late 80s, and he had already called up Gary Pudney, who was one of the producers, and said he wanted to be in Dynasty. And Gary said, well, I'm sorry, but, you know, we don't have any parts for you. He said, but you don't understand, I am Dynasty, which of course he was.
Yeah.
So he gave me this party with his wife, Ivana, who became a very good friend, Ivana, up until her death. I mean, we were in the south of France a lot together. And he was very, very nice to me, very charming, and he had all the press there. Of course, he loved having all the press there. And there was, I remember going, this was at the Trump Tower, and we went down this amazing moving staircase, escalator, in Trump Tower that was all kind of like gold plated and whatever, and there were dozens of photographers and people shooting, but he was very nice then. Yeah.
You said then. You're not so keen now?
Well, I'm not going to answer that.
No, I think you've been to Chequers. Was it
the only person who's invited me to Chequers was Tony Blair.
Extraordinary.
Yeah, the only one. I sat next to him. We had a really good talk.
Did you like him?
I did.
Yeah.
I liked him a lot.
He's incredible. And at the peak of his powers, he was incredible.
He was. The people's president. No, he called it the people's...
He called Princess Diana the people's princess. Yeah. It was a brilliant line.
But he was...
he was charismatic.
I did like him.
Yeah. Did you like Boris?
I loved Boris. Boris was a friend. Yeah, I saw Boris the other day at a party. He's still very funny. And I like John Major very much.
Right.
He and I were on the talk show circuit last year.
Right.
And we bumped into each other.
You'd be listening to him.
He's a very, very good speech maker.
I'm sure he is.
Shirley Bassey and I were at Downing Street when he was making an off-the-record speech about something very serious, I can't remember, and Shirley and I were saying, he's brilliant, and he was, I thought.
Yeah. Just very tricky. I had quite a few run-ins with John Major when he was Prime Minister.
You've had a few run-ins with everyone.
It's true. And what I was going to ask you about, Mrs. Thatcher I didn't know you then, but at Mrs Thatcher's 80th birthday party, I was there, and you were there.
I loved Mrs Thatcher. I thought she was wonderful.
She was very frail, wasn't she?
She was so wonderful. I was at her funeral as well.
So was I. Yeah.
I met her several times, and through Tim Bell, because Tim Bell knew that I liked her, and he
Tim
introduced.
Bell was, of course, her advisor and ad man, and helped with her speeches and her voice, lowering her voice.
Oh, right, yeah. I thought she was a great example of people getting up off their asses and getting down to it.
Yeah.
I think there's just too much laying about today.
Yeah, yeah.
Oh my God, why is there so much mental health stuff? You must know that.
I don't know the answer there, and particularly with young people.
Yeah, is it because of COVID?
I think it was a part of the problem, because they were locked down, locked at home, didn't get out, didn't get to school, didn't see their friends.
Right.
And I think we're going to pay a price for COVID for a long time.
Oh.
And I don't think we should have closed the schools down, Joan.
I don't think we should have closed down, period.
No.
I mean, Sweden didn't close down, did it? And Sweden had not much, many...
And they've also had their COVID public inquiry done and dusted, and we're still halfway through ours. It's ridiculous, isn't it? Very good. And just finally, we've got the behind-the-shoulder pads. It's being called as for one night only. You will be on stage with one Percy Gibson, husband number 5.
Oh, stop.
But you've been married now for 21
It'll be 22 and a half years.
He's a great guy, isn't he?
He's the best. Everybody loves Percy.
Yeah,
he really is. And it was the greatest marriage by far, 100%. And one of the best things I ever did in my life.
Right.
Yeah, was marrying Percy.
Well, that was Dame Joan Collins. An honour for me to talk to Joan Collins. I have confession here, we are very good friends.
Yes.
But we rarely do this.
We've never done this.
Never done this.
No, this
we
is
did
the
it on
first.
stage in Cheltenham Town Hall.
Oh, you were great.
During the Cheltenham Literature Festival.
Yes.
When, if you haven't read Joan's diaries, oh my God, wicked and waspish is an understatement. And if you think I can be wicked and waspish, oh my God, there is no comparison.
And witty.
Dame Joan Collins' pen is. So, thank you for joining us.
It's a pleasure.
And will you come on GB News again?
Oh, yeah, absolutely, yes. Yeah, will you come and see Behind the Shoulder Pads on October the 22nd?
I have already bought my tickets.
Oh, you didn't have to buy them.
I did, of course I did. So that
amazing.
She's
really
amazing, isn't
that,
she?
Andrew, honestly.
Dame Joan Collins, she's a legend. Behind the Shoulder Pads, it is at the Adelphi Theatre in London on October the 22nd. If you're going to go, get your tickets booked quick, because they'll sell out, because she's got so many stories to tell.
It's
and
really interesting.
The second act of the show, it's the audience opportunity to put questions to her, and she answers them all very, very frankly. So I'm already racking my brains thinking what I'm going to ask her.
I knew she was wise, but I didn't know she felt like that about lockdowns. I've got a renewed appreciation for her now.
Absolutely.
Right, still to come, we're going to be discussing what you thought about Dame Joan Collins' interview, and find out why me and Andrew are spending the weekend together. This is Britain's Newsroom on GB News.
That's terrifying, isn't it?
Welcome to State of the Nation, daily plunge into the stories shaping our country. I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, and Monday to Thursday we bring you the insights, the facts, the truth about how our country is being governed. Because what happens in Downing Street matters down your street. Tune in to State of the Nation every Monday to Thursday, 8 to 9 o'clock. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Sir Jacob Rees-Mogg's State of the Nation, Monday to Thursday from 8 p.m.
One of the most eminent constitutional experts, Sir Vernon Bogdaner, has published his latest book, Making the Weather, 6 Politicians That Changed Modern Britain, covering 3 eminent figures on the left, Nye Bevan, Roy Jenkins and Tony Benn, as well as 3 on the right, Enoch Powell, Keith Joseph and Nigel Farage. We began by discussing the latter, the newly elected Member of Parliament for Clacton and leader of the Reform Party. I started by asking him how Nigel Farage has had such a fundamental effect on British politics.
Well, it's not difficult to underline Nigel Farage's effect. He's partly, perhaps largely, responsible for Brexit, which, whether one's in favour of it or not, is the most consequential foreign policy decision we've made since the war. And he's also, I think, largely responsible for destroying 3 Conservative Prime Ministers, David Cameron, Theresa May and more recently Rishi Sunak, How's he done it? I think the answer is quite simple. He's a brilliant communicator. And that, in a way, is the first task of a politician, to be a communicator. The first task of an academic is to teach and write books. The first task of a politician is to be able to communicate. And sad to say, neither Keir Starmer nor Rishi Sunak, whatever their other virtues, are very good communicators. So I think that's the reason for his success.
And Nigel's always been very good at communicating a complex issue through a simple message, and that has resonated with the people that he's trying to influence.
Absolutely. He speaks to people with language they can understand. He doesn't use language they can't understand, like missions or strategic aims or management speak, which has really taken over both of the major parties, I think, frankly.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Your lunchtime update on the stories that matter across the UK.
From breaking news and insightful analysis, inspiring stories and lively debates. You're comparing yourself to a former Prime Minister.
Which is it? Stay informed, stay updated, stay entertained.
I just don't know how anyone would not want to be there.
Every weekday from midday.
We are Good Afternoon Britain, only on GB News.
Britain's news channel.
It's 11:51. This is Britain's Newsroom on GB News. A lot of people are getting in touch about the interview with Joan Collins. Anthony says, thank you very much. Your brilliant, relaxed interview with this great lady, which I'm enjoying as I write.
And Grumpy Grandad, who, as we know, is a member, says Joan is doing well. She doesn't change much. He said she's still got all her marbles. Now, I'm not sure that's an entirely complimentary way to say that a woman of her vintage is incredibly smart and articulate.
She's great.
She's great.
Susan says Joan Collins is a national treasure. Robert says Joan Collins, with her considerable experience of life, is an excellent source for the cultural changes in our society for the last 60 years. And Sarah says, loving Dame Joan Collins, what a legend. She is a legend, isn't she?
Claudette has said, I like this. Dame Joan, are you coming to see Behind the Shoulder Pads? Andrew, I've already bought my tickets. Joan, you didn't have to do that. Obviously, Andrew is no couch surfing Keir Starmer. He would have had his hand out before anything was offered.
Very good point. I have bought my tickets and I did pay for them.
Yeah, I know. I had to buy your book.
You did?
Talking of which...
Oh, yes.
This is why we're spending Saturday together, because I have the joy of interviewing Andrew Pearce on stage on Saturday at the Henley Literary Festival about your book, about your adoption journey.
Finding Margaret, which is about finding my birth mother, which is selling very well.
Yeah.
And
I think there's still tickets.
I think it's the first book festival I've spoken... No, the second.
Is it?
My second,
talked about this book?
Yeah, I talked to one... I did one a book festival in South Shields, and they sold out.
Oh,
which was nice.
Visitors to Henley on Saturday, make sure you bring your money to buy one of Andrew's books.
You get it autographed, of course, personally autographed to you, of course.
Right, and let's see what else we've been saying. John says, Dame Joan, what a class act. She makes the Labour women look like a bunch of screaming banshees.
Yeah.
Oof. And Dave says, what a great interview. You both look very at ease with each other. Brilliant. She's a legend. She is, of course, a good old friend of yours. You've got a holiday together, don't you?
Yeah, we do, yeah.
She's probably seen you in your Speedos.
She has, but they're not Speedos. They're, what do you call them? Bermuda boxers. Bermuda shorts. Bermuda shorts, yeah. I've seen her in her bikini. She's got great legs.
Oh, yeah, it's great, isn't it? Right. Don't go anywhere. We're going to take a quick break, and then Tom and... Oh, It's midday. It's flown by.
I know. And don't forget, I'm going to be with you next week from the Tory Party conference. I bet you can't wait.
Bye. Yes, it's time for us already on Good Afternoon Britain. Lots coming up. Turns out the plot is thickening, isn't it, when it comes to Keir Starmer's use of that £18 million penthouse, courtesy of Lord Ali. He was using it to tell people to work from home during COVID.
And there's been blunders from the government on prisons. Dozens of people that weren't meant to be let out of our prisons have been. What's been going on? That and new Treasury analysis shows that these tax rises on non-doms might not raise any money at all.
Looks like things are heating up. Boxed boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Morning.
morning. Welcome to your latest weather update from the Met Office. Here on GB News, we are expecting the rain to cause further issues over the next day and a half. Further heavy rain today, tonight and tomorrow morning is expected to cause further flooding. Met Office warnings are in place. Check the Met Office website or app for full details. Particularly wet today over North East England, parts of Northern Ireland, North Wales, also seeing some heavy downpours. And in the south, a bit more showery in nature. There'll be some brighter spells, but here too, some heavy downpours are likely. Much of Scotland looking dry, some sunny spells on the west coast. It's quite cool here. Temperatures elsewhere struggling in the mid-teens, feeling pretty chilly with that persistent rain and the winds coming in from the North Sea over North East England and the far southeast of Scotland. Further south, we will see some sunny spells through the day, but there'll still be some heavy downpours around as the rain builds up here, particularly tonight and tomorrow. The potential for further flooding, a wet zone over North Wales and northern England. As I said, looking a little drier across the southwest of Scotland. A scattering of showers in northern Scotland with that northerly wind bringing a chill. The wet weather this morning should clear away from Northern Ireland, but likely to linger in North Wales, northern England well into this evening, and then we're looking at some heavier bursts of rain developing over the Midlands and southern England and South Wales as we go through the night. Because it's been so wet this week, that is likely to cause some further flooding issues through the night and first thing in the morning. Temperatures just about holding up in double figures tonight, but further north it is turning colder. The northerly winds pushing the rain away, but also introducing a cooler feel. Some good spells of sunshine tomorrow over central and southern Scotland. A much brighter day over northeast England. The rain should also finally clear from southern parts after a wet start, so many areas becoming dry.